I dreamt about being the quarterback of the San Francisco 49ers. So you can imagine my disappointment in 2005 when they decided to go a different direction.
3rd and 1, Rodgers play action, looks to the end zone, rainbows, Jordy Nelson.
He is the winner today. His charity, the Mac Fund, will receive $50,000.
Yeah, I've been immunized. To win the Super Bowl MVP was not a goal. It was not something I thought about really until I got on the podium and someone said, hey, you're going to be the MVP. I was expected to play well. You know, I did. It was a sweet journey. It's special to know that on that one day in 2011 that we were the best in the world.
Hello friends, hello, I'm Carly Wharton and welcome to another video. How are you? How's your day going? I am so excited to hang out with you for a little while. I am what I would call a budding evolutionary astrologer. You know, that's something we could unpack sometime. What that means. It's a whole thing all by itself. In these episodes, I will take us through some of the most inspirational leaders, cunning con artists, moneymakers, rump shakers, and everything in between. If you have an idea of someone that you would like to see me cover in one of these episodes, please leave it in the comments. And while you're doing me favors, if you could like this video and maybe even subscribe to my channel, it does help boost it on YouTube so this work sees the light of day for more people, and that might be a good thing. You know, I appreciate it, like a lot. For those who live under a rock like I do, the 38-year-old Aaron Rodgers is the quarterback for the Green Bay Packers, has been since 2008. He led them to a Super Bowl victory in 2011 and has been voted MVP 3 different times. Apparently that's a big deal. This is where I need to insert a little disclaimer because I am not what you would call a football fan and I know basically nothing about the sport. And so to cover someone who is a professional football player, I have given it my very best to familiarize myself with the magic of what he's got going on. So yeah, forgive me any like football faux pas. Like just go with me. Correct me in the comments. I like to learn. You could tell me. I'll learn it. That's cool. Whether or not you're into football though, Aaron Rodgers is a fascinating case overall and here recently for reasons that we'll get into, and if you're a fan you're probably already familiar with. My team and I, we were looking at this being Sagittarius season, the sun moving through Sagittarius right now. We've looked for someone with prominent Sagittarius energy in their chart. That's what we were aiming for. And Aaron Rodgers happens to be who we are choosing to illustrate this point with. This point being Sagittarius season. You know, as the sun moves through this sign, that energy is available to all of us. So he happens to have a really exaggerated amount of Sagittarius energy. So it's a really helpful example to be able to study that energy close up and be able to somewhat use his energy as a mirror for ourselves to feel our way into our own Sagittarius energy, because we all possess all 12 of the zodiac energies are within each of us. Plus, when you add in his recent kerfluffle with the media over his vaccination status, this becomes a very timely discussion regarding his vaccination status. COVID-19 has been a hot button issue, to say the least, regardless of which side of all the things you land on. And remember, there are way more than just two sides to everything. Figuring out what you believe in and then aligning your life with that, those principles, whatever you've come to as your own personal experience of the truth, align your day-to-day life with that, embody that truth that you've found. That is like the very essence of Sagittarius energy. So this whole conversation allows us to see what we can learn about tapping into the full range of possibilities that's open to us with any zodiac energy, right? Like anytime we look at one of these energies, it's just a range of potential. There are low frequencies, those are like shadow sides and negative behavior that is destructive in nature. Every single one of the 12 zodiac signs is capable of their shadow frequencies. And then on the flip side of that, you have the highest range of potential for each zodiac sign. And this is where I get excited because it is exciting to think about every single one of the 12 zodiac signs has its own range of brilliance, its own unique skill set, like its range of intelligence. There are 12 different kinds of intelligence, and open to that awareness of tapping into and maximizing all sides of intelligence, which I feel like this conversation as a whole already has a very Sagittarian vibe to it because we're talking philosophy, we're talking belief systems, we're talking like internal structures, how we make sense of the world. What matters to you? What animates you in your life? What do you devote your very finite energy towards? Like, is it worth it? Do you like it? Is it satisfying? I don't know. These are questions, you know. I have heavy Sagittarius energy myself, and it seems something of like a life journey for me personally to evolve through figuring out what I believe and lining my life up with that so I am the walking embodiment of my beliefs. So, Sagittarius, man. So, this example could not be more perfect at this time. Okay, but on top of his controversial lack of vaccination, he also made some creative decisions around how to represent himself at a press conference here just a few months ago.
I'd like to learn as many things as you can to hang in any conversation. Are you vaccinated, and what's your stance on vaccinations?
Yeah, I've been immunized. There's a lot of conversation around it, around the league, and a lot of guys who have made statements and I've made statements, owners who've made statements. There's guys on the team that haven't been vaccinated. I think it's a personal decision. I'm not going to judge those guys. There's guys who've been vaccinated that contracted COVID. So it's an interesting issue that I think we're going to see played out the entire season. I'm not sure what they're going to do with, the testing schedule. I know that talking to JC, the PA had talked about testing every single day for everybody. The league obviously, I think, shot that down or didn't want to do that. I don't know if that was financially incentivized or whatnot, but yeah, it'd be interesting to see what happens if we can, if the protocols change at some point. It's obviously something that's moving. It's the protocols and the outline guidelines are kind of changing day to day, I think it seems.
So when he said, yeah, I've been immunized, was that a lie? It depends on how you define immunized. Words themselves, people attach such connotations and such projected meaning. You hear somebody say something and you automatically, without much thought at all, assume that they define that the same way that you would. It is important to note here just at some point in the story that the NFL does not require that the players be vaccinated. So it is up to the discretion of the player whether or not they want to. And it seems like the players who have chosen not to become vaccinated are kind of being harassed, for lack of a better word, like being bullied by the public a little bit towards conforming. And I personally throw up a roadblock anytime anybody wants anybody to conform with anything. I have a harsh allergy to conforming with other people's belief systems, and I believe very strongly in this whole Sagittarian idea of figuring out what you believe and lining your life up with that, letting go of anybody else's experience and figuring out for yourself like what works for you. and then living that, becoming the full-blown embodiment of whatever it is that you believe. Come to find out, in November, Aaron tested positive for COVID, so it came out in the aftermath of all of that that he was not actually vaccinated.
Yeah, I've been immunized.
With the eye movement, which I can't help but note because it's classic. The eye movement itself reminds me of a skier. You know, like they're going down the hill and there's improvisation required. So like kind of lean into it, kind of go with it. And that eye movement that he did was him skiing, him finding his way through the obstacle that has now presented itself. And we'll get more into how he's wired and should the media be allowed to ask questions, anything they want, and then just shove a microphone in your face. There's a lot of different sides. I don't peddle conclusions. I peddle questions and perspectives and sides of thought that, there's so many tangents, there's so many different ways to look at it, especially when you put yourself in the person's shoes. It's all just a process of seeing what we can learn, like kind of like the magic school bus. Like, let's go take an adventure through somebody's energy field and see what we find. So long before Aaron was controversial because of his vaccination status, he also has a lot of history with girlfriends and rumors supposedly about their, sex life. So we're going to get into that just like a little bit, which feels really weird. And I'm going to take it on as my own personal challenge to like be as respectful of people's privacy as possible while still, driving the magic school bus into what can we learn from all of this. He also has beef with his family, apparently. And I believe at one point their quote was that they were dismayed at the story that he told on an episode of a podcast. And so there's a lot of karma around him, it seems, in terms of that playing out in his relationships. What can we learn? Because he's not the only one with karma playing out in their relationships. I, for one, and I know basically every human on the face of the planet. So we can all look into this mirror named Aaron Rodgers and see what we can learn about ourselves and the people around us. I did put timestamps in the description if you want to skip the life story part and jump straight to the astrological analysis. That's totally cool. I, for one, was introduced to Aaron Rodgers a week ago, so I am going to tell you what I have learned about him this week that I find interesting, making special note to include the things that are laying the groundwork for later on interpreting his energy and what we see present in his natal chart and his human design chart. There's also timestamps there in the middle for actually looking at his charts. Aaron Rodgers was born December 2nd, 1983. He is the middle child of 3 boys, and he was born in Chico, California. In 1988, he accepted Christ when he was 4.5 years old. This is according to him in an interview that he gave. And he also stated in that same interview that he grew up going to church every Sunday, youth groups, all of that it was just very much what you did. It was the structure that he was born into. And I include this because Sagittarius energy is all about figuring out what we personally, individually believe as a human soul. And so often that requires us to bump into other people's belief systems. And honestly, the more Sagittarius energy you carry, the more likely you are to be heavily indoctrinated with other people's beliefs so that you have the weight of that to have to wade through to find your beliefs. And in the end of all of that, it's like anything else. Like the more you put into something, the more you're going to get out. Like there's massive potential to be one of the clearest beings of all time in terms of embodying what you know to be true. What you can feel is true in your soul, not just feeling it, not just knowing it, but being it. My point to all of that is that Sagittarius relies heavily on life experience. So to make any kind of theological, belief system type commitment at age 4.5 seems fundamentally flawed from the get-go with his upbringing. And I think modern day religion as a whole, at least, there are some religions that don't let you commit commit to the faith until later in life. And as far as Sagittarius energy is concerned, I really highly agree with that it takes, I mean, a few decades even to live enough life to figure out like who you really are and what you really stand for. There are some people who do it much faster than that, and we're going to get into their charts. We have some planned for Aquarius season. Those people, oh my goodness. But for this sake, Sagittarius and belief systems, it does take time to build any kind of really sturdy and personally satisfying belief structures. It takes time and life experience to do that. So his commitment to Christ at age 4.5, I'm going to go ahead and say we should let him off the hook for that. 2002, and I'm positive there's life story that happened while he was in high school and younger and all of that, and he played lots of sports and all kinds of good things. But we're going to start there because, this is already a very long video. So 2002, he graduates high school and he does not have any D1 offers, Division 1 offers to like go play football for a Division 1 college or university. I don't know, maybe, I don't know. So because of that, he ends up meeting a coach at Butte Community College. I think that's how you say it, maybe Butte. I probably should have looked up how to pronounce that. That's okay though. And he was their quarterback on that team for 1 year while he played there. And then at the end of his freshman year, he was recruited to Cal. I'm going to just stop and highlight here. Already, we're seeing what is going to become a pattern. In order for him to move to his next level of like physical accomplishment, there is almost a testament of his internal emotional self, like his emotional resiliency. Like he has to be knocked down before he can really ascend to the next level, and we're going to see how that plays out in his energy. But this is the first time where like, he was passed over at the end of high school because he wasn't athletic enough and he was like not cool under pressure or something. There were lots of reasons that people gave on why he didn't measure up as far as like coming to play for a D1 school. And that circumstance of getting passed over, it's easy to look at it like, well, he probably wasn't athletic enough, or he wasn't cool under pressure, or like whatever, that like they had legitimate reasons, and they probably did. But at the same time, he's got karma that almost requires him to get pushed down before he can stand up. And we're going to see it play out as we look at his life. And then especially when we look at his chart. So he finishes up Cal. He's got a 4-year degree. And then he is intending to draft into the NFL. So he's probably like 22 at this point if he spent 4 years doing college. As he tells it, he had a very successful technical interview, which I guess is where they like actually watch him run and stuff. You see, I don't know. But he had a very good interview. He felt really good about it and was verbally told that they were going in his direction. And so he walks in to the 2005 draft thinking that he's going first. Basically, the 49ers have first pick. They have expressed, we weren't there, we don't know, but he had reason to believe that they were picking him and that he was going to be the first one to go. And they famously ended up picking the other QB that was being drafted at that time, not him. And he proceeded to sit in the green room on live television for 5 hours. And he ended up going 24th in the draft. Projected to go first, ended up going 24th. So I also just want to pause here for a second, pause for the cause, because I personally have never lived a life experience where you're on live television, for one thing, and 2, you are having your heart stomped on. First, like, it's not betrayal necessarily. It's not like, they signed a contract and then they went back on it. Like, but I gotta think there's a little bit of that. There's a little bit of like, I feel misled, And so you're dealing with that. Plus, now there's the uncertainty of like, holy crap, I thought they were going to pick me. Now who's going to pick me? And as, to listen to the documentary version, it sounds like there were a whole host of reasons why he didn't get picked sooner, which I found very interesting because I personally believe that everything is always working out for us. Thank you, Abraham Hicks. I mean, things happen and they unfold the way that they're supposed to. So he was supposed to play for Green Bay and they happened to have the 24th pick, so he went 24th. And I love that there's this clip of this guy talking about how exactly that, like, it all worked out the way it was supposed to.
The 49ers had chosen Alex Smith, number 1. Hours later, they would have the 33rd overall pick at the top of the second round.
When Aaron began to drop as he did, we actually at one point started to talk, look guys, if he gets to the end of it, do we take them both? And we actually had the conversation, hey, if Aaron's sitting there as well, do we want to pull the trigger on both of them?
Things could get interesting now for Aaron Rodgers, possibly Green Bay looking for a quarterback. No one's really sure how much longer Brett Favre will play.
About 3 or 4 days before the draft, I was convinced that the best thing to do if he got to us was pick Aaron Rodgers. We draft based on what we consider to be the best player available, or we try to. We weren't going to do anything crazy, you know, moving up and things like that, but we were just going to let the draft play itself out and hope against hope that it would work out. I told him at the time when I made the call and then told him we were going to pick him that I thought maybe some divine intervention had played a part.
With the 24th selection in the 2005 NFL Draft, the Green Bay Packers select Aaron Rodgers, quarterback from California.
There you go. Look here already.
Once I was picked, I think the reality of living out a childhood dream and, you know what, I'm in the NFL now. Let's focus on the positives. Started to kick in.
Also, looking back on the experience, Aaron had some wisdom.
Some things are definitely worth waiting for. And Aaron Rodgers, quarterback out of Cal, had to wait almost 5 hours. What was this day like for you?
Well, it wasn't the easiest day, but yeah, it was a long day. Not a lot of things went the way we thought they'd go, but I'm just so excited about being able to go to a team that wants me and a team that I can learn from the greatest quarterback of our day right now, and I'm just excited to get out of that green room, and I couldn't be happier with the team that picked me and what next year and the years to come is going to look like being a Packer.
You know, it's kind of ironic, the guy that probably faced the most, if you want to call embarrassment, during the draft, the camera's on you and everything, and you're following is, you know, he turns out to be the best one in the entire draft. As it shows today, he made a lot of guys' careers just by that one pick.
This is also where I get to tell you in 2005, same year as the draft, was also when he reports his UFO sighting taking place, unidentified flying object. Like, as far as him telling the story, which the link is in the references if you want to listen to the whole thing, he doesn't necessarily like jump to the conclusion that like aliens are the thing. He just like had a very tangible physical experience of this huge light that like took up the whole sky, and it was something of a shared experience. There were multiple people included. It was real. And that happened. So how do you make sense of that? But as he tells the story, he doesn't really jump forward to conclusions about aliens and all of that. Not that he shouldn't, you know, think about it, but he doesn't. So I'm just planting that seed again, as far as like Sagittarius is all about the experiences that we live personally in our lives, and then having to make sense of that as far as our belief structures about the world. I got to think that UFO sighting was very, like, planted a pretty good sized seed that it sprouted into doubt and wondering and questioning and all of those things that would go along with having some kind of unexplained experience like that. Okay, so he's on Green Bay's team. He's now on the roster. But you got to remember that Brett Favre was not done playing yet, and I guess he wasn't like fully aware that they were planning to draft Aaron Rodgers. And I mean, he was projected to go first and he ended up being 24th. So I can't imagine Favre was expecting any of this. So apparently he and Aaron kind of got off to a rocky start, which that kind of power struggle also really plays into what we talked about with, it seems like for him to move to the next level, he's got to be pushed down so that he has something to like push himself back up with. I've been spending the whole week wrapping my mind around how his energy works, and you know, like you get as far as you can and then you make the video. Him and Favre not getting along so good. That also means that Rodgers is on the bench watching, waiting. And that is like kind of like having to go to junior college for a year before you get to go to university. Like it's just kind of that same vibe of like he's so close and yet no, it's not you. And like that just, you know, Okay, that's got to, again, be a very humbling experience to have to check yourself. And you're now the low man on the totem pole and like, yeah, work your way back up. Like, okay, cool. Doing that again. Okay, so a few years later, after Aaron joins the team, Favre is now 38 and he decides that he is ready to retire and he goes through the whole thing and retires.
Completing this one, the Jennings, touchdown Packers.
This unexpectedly blessed season is over for the Packers, and the Giants move on to face the Patriots in the Super Bowl, winning 23-20.
We come and go. Seems like just yesterday we were here.
Well, I think we all know why I'm here. First of all, sorry I'm late, but I am officially retiring from the NFL and Green Bay Packers. And as they say, all good things must come to an end. Wish Aaron well. I think he'll do a great job. I think he has the talent. He doesn't, I've heard it for the last 3 years that hopefully he's learned from Brett. What that means, I don't know. He's his own player, his own style, and that's what he needs to stick to.
Okay, so now remember that after that, he only stayed retired for 4 months. And then he came out of retirement and wanted to come back to the Packers, to football in general. He sounded like he really didn't care where he played. He just wanted to play again. And so the Packers re-signed him to the roster. And now the head coaches are having to go through this. I just had the fear that I wasn't actually recording. Okay, all is well. So yeah, now they have to go through this whole emotionally traumatic experience again of having to decide, do you go back and start Favre again, or are you going to start Rodgers? Is it his turn to step out into, his role as the face of the organization, which I didn't know the quarterback was the face. I didn't know that was a thing. But anyway, so he's a thing. He's a thing. He's a leader thing. It's a leadership thing, I guess. So there's, let's see, what am I talking about? Well, all worked out well in the end for Aaron, like it always seems to do. After these really emotional paths to get there, he always seems to come through it. And it's almost like, the hard circumstances that he has to come through, it is sort of the evolutionary path that his soul intended to walk. So this was no different. The head coaches decided that it was his turn to step out into being the face of the organization, and they ended up trading Favre to a different team. So that means in 2008, he started his first NFL game, and in 2011, he led the Packers to the Super Bowl victory and was voted the MVP. In 2014, Aaron starts dating actress Olivia Munn. Up until this point, it seemed like he dated quite a few different people, none for a really long time up until this relationship with Olivia, where they dated for 3 years. It was at the end of 2014 when Aaron had a falling out with his brother and stopped speaking to his family altogether. And there was a lot of speculation that this was Olivia's fault, but I personally, after everything that I've looked at this week, which is, whatever, check my references, I don't believe that she was the cause of it. It seemed like, they both agreed that it had been going on before that relationship started, that there was already a rift in the family. She even goes on Radio Andy there at one point after her and Aaron broke up and clarified this.
I was friendly with Jordan, and I met the parents only a couple times, and before he and I started dating, he hadn't spoken to the parents and one brother for 8 months before we started dating.
So there was already a rift.
I remember my last day on the newsroom, when I was filming the newsroom, I spent the day in my trailer just encouraging him and to have an honest conversation with your parents, and just kind of, bullet point stuff. And then they had a really nice conversation. And then they started coming out when my first year, when I was in Green Bay in 2014. And then, it just,
It just went south.
Yeah, I mean, and that's that.
You tried.
Well, I just think it's really important to try to mend things in a family, and I encourage that. But at the end of the day, I mean,
it was out of your control.
Well, I do believe that family and fame and success can be really complicated if their dreams are connected to your success.
So anyways, in 2015, this is when Aaron gets to go on Celebrity Jeopardy, and he ends up winning. So he beats Kevin O'Leary, who is Mr. Wonderful from Shark Tank, and astronaut Mark Kelly. So, not too shabby. He says that he grew up spending summers with his grandparents and that they introduced him to both Jeopardy and crossword puzzles, and that he still loves to do both to keep his brain sharp amidst all of the concussions that he has had. So, yeah, you gotta just pause and feel grateful that your line of work doesn't lead to multiple concussions. It's the little things. In 2016, his younger brother Jordan, the one that he had the falling out with, goes on The Bachelorette.
Has fame ripped apart the family of Green Bay Packers hero Aaron Rodgers.
Is all over The Bachelorettes this season. His younger brother Jordan is in the final two, and Jordan revealed their family estrangement to millions of viewers.
Me and Aaron don't really have that much of a relationship.
He actually ends up getting chosen, and their finale has like 8.5 million watches like that night. Again, I just from a place of I've never lived through it, I can't even imagine, but when we get into how private of an individual he really is, and we all have that side of ourselves, that privacy, that need for privacy, obviously everybody relates to it differently, but when we see how private he really is, I can't imagine how emotionally traumatic it was for basically the whole country to see your personal private business. Oh my God, it makes me want to throw up. Ugh. Shake it off. So moving forward, April of 2017, this is when Aaron and Olivia break up after 3 years of dating. And this is where I begin to notice a pattern of, if you include the 2005 draft that happened in April, he broke up with Olivia in April, and we'll see some other things that just seem to be turning points that happen for him in April. So I got really curious, and I was like, what do the transits, the current planets, look like in April? And it is very interesting to see how the sun and the moon specifically work with his chart during Taurus season, so in the spring. So yeah, it's just, I gotta love astrology, man. It can tell you so much. All right, so Aaron isn't built really to be by himself. We'll see this more when we get to his chart discussion, and I don't mean that in any kind of a condescending way. He literally is built to do his evolutionary work with other people. So when he's single, he's kind of missing a big chunk of what he's about. So naturally, he doesn't stay single for very long. He's also a very magnetic individual, so he tends to attract the perfect person at the perfect time kind of thing. So April 2017, he breaks up with Olivia. January 2018, so not even a full year later, he goes public with Danica Patrick, the former, apparently retired race car driver. This is when they go public, so who knows when they actually started dating. Danica is also very intent on bridging the gap between Aaron and his family. So this is like an effort that she puts in to the relationship, like a dedication that she feels about doing this work to mend these bridges. So she does that, and it seems like it's working, and they're talking and all of that. And then he goes on her podcast. She starts a podcast. He's her 20th episode in March of 2020. They do an hour and 45-minute interview on Danica's podcast. And I have got to tell you before I get into that you guys have got to watch this. If you like studying human behavior and relationship dynamics and the vibrational communication between two people, you got to go watch it because it is wild. There is so much boiling under the surface. And man, it is interesting to note that they did break up just a couple months after that. So, yeah, that makes sense to me. But anywho, so during this interview, they talk about a huge range of subjects. And if you want to get to know Aaron, I would also say this is probably the best look that I found into his personality, even with the dynamic between the two of them. She knows him well enough to ask the right questions, even if she does interrupt him when she's asking him, and he looks like he don't like that at all. There was also this clip, which makes me think he don't like to be interrupted.
It just felt like he played really good. And if he's playing good, yeah, I expect those guys next to him to be locked in as well. I'm not done yet. Thank you. Yeah. Go ahead.
I apologize.
That's okay.
I just was.
During the interview, they talked about all kinds of things. One of the topics that they came around to was his spiritual path and the journey, because he did grow up in the church and with religion, and that was just what you do. As he got older, he lived life and he had experiences that opened him up and made him wonder about different things and question, these foundations of beliefs that he had been brought up with that had seemed like this is just what it is. He began to question. And again, when we see how his energy is wired, it makes total sense. I do want to play you the full clip of this little chunk of the conversation. Mind you, the full episode's an hour and 45 minutes long, but these couple minutes, because it really does go to show how he has felt into his own belief system. And this is the interview where his family responded that they were dismayed.
What was the question about church? Where are you going with that?
Well, I didn't really pose a question yet. I was just basically laying the framework for something we connect on, my own quick overview of, feeling like I've had my own little arc, but you've had a bigger one. And when you were a kid, you went to church all the time and then went through your questioning and have arrived where you're at now. So maybe it would be interesting for people to understand kind of where you started.
Yeah, I accepted Christ when I was 4.5 years old. Did the on a knee, saying the prayer, go to church, and that's what you do on Sundays. You go to your breakout group or, your age-appropriate group, or you stay in big church, depending on how old you were or what the day was, and singing songs and kind of listen to the message, and that's just kind of normal, At some point in high school, they always say, they being kind of the church, it's got to become your own religion. It's, it's got to be meaningful to me and to you and to me and to whoever's there. And so you go to a high school group and you do all the right things.
Got to be meaningful, Dave.
Well, the church uses all this language and code words and phrases and, as far as...
Like what?
Well, like born again or...
Is the born again the 4-year-old accepting Christ situation?
Yeah, but I think there had to be another one as well. There's always kind of rites that you have to do, like RITES, like traditional religious things. You check marks. You gotta take care of, little boxes. You gotta
like going.
Yeah, like going to church and saying the right prayer and wearing a promise ring, or
Did
whatever.
you wear a promise ring?
I could not do that. But there's just little idiosyncrasies in religion, which looking back now are so silly and antiquated and not important. But for me, I think most people that I knew, church was you just had to go. Your parents made you go, you wake up, you put some clothes on, you go, and you can't wait to get back and watch the second game of the day in the NFL on TV. But I started going to Young Life, and that's where I met Matt Hawk, who Matt was leading our Young Life group there for a while, and he was the first Christian that I met where I was like, man, this dude swears every now and then. He loves sports. He coaches sports. He's he's an awesome dude. He's taken what seems normal interest in my life, and just a really rad guy to be around. I kind of like the way that he talks about Jesus and the way that he talks about what it means to have a relationship with Christ. That's pretty cool. When I got out of that area, Young Life, and moved on, to college and stuff, there's not really a Young Life for college. It gets into more organized, athletes in action or whatever it might be, campus organizations, and I just didn't find any connection points with those things, and started questioning things, and had some good friendships along the way that helped me, to figure out what exactly I wanted to believe in. And ultimately it was that rules and regulations and binary systems don't really resonate with me. And so I slowly moved away from a lot of that stuff and, enjoyed learning about other religions and meeting the Dalai Lama. And, it's been a fun path to a different type of spirituality, which to me is it's been more meaningful.
So we don't know a lot about the feud that Aaron has with his family, but I'm going to go out on a limb and tell you that, these dots connected in my mind, so make of that what you will. But it is interesting that they were dismayed and the relationship resevered after these comments. So it is interesting to think about, is that a lot of why there's a rift? Because he's not willing to live their belief system. He's intent on finding his own. Is that kind of the beginning of the rift? The Sagittarius archetype is about living your own life and forming your own beliefs, feeling for yourself through your vessel what's true. Every single human being on this earth can come to a different conclusion of what's true. I mean, that's just the human condition. And the way we're wired differently. So especially with all of his Sagittarius energy, the whole reason we're talking about him, his path is tied inextricably to forming his own beliefs and becoming the embodiment of those beliefs. So the fact that his parents were dismayed, and maybe even making the leap that that's a bigger cause for the rift, it just is like the US Constitution gives us freedom of religion, and yet our parents don't have to. And that's an interesting food for thought. So about a month after he does the Danica podcast and the family relationship resevers, the Packers go through the draft. It's April, and they draft a quarterback. And Aaron was unaware of this strategy. I put this in here to really illustrate how interesting it is, just the similarities between, that's basically the gist of how Aaron was brought in under Favre, and now they're bringing in a new quarterback under Aaron. And I mean, he's the same age right now as Favre was when he retired. There are obviously quarterbacks older who are still playing, so he's got time left if he wants it, if he wants it. But now that QB is sitting on the bench, and it's got to feel like a ticking time clock of you're almost done getting to do this. I literally cried watching Brett Favre's retirement speech because he really did put it into perspective.
I am officially retiring from the NFL and Green Bay Packers. As they say, all good things must come to an end.
All good things must come to an end. We don't get to do what we're doing right now forever. It's right now. And if that's not inspiring all of us to soak up the right now moment, I don't know what is. So yeah, I share that. So a couple months after that is when him and Danica break up. So that's July. And in January of 2021, their 2020-2021 season was very successful. He led them to the championship game, and they ended up losing and didn't get to go to the Super Bowl. Even sadder that they did lose on their own turf. So again, to come so close and not get it, I'm personally really hoping that has lit a fire under his ass for this season. It seems like they're playing really well. Shortly after that, he announces in February of 2021, this year, that he is engaged to Shailene Woodley, another actress, and that they are getting married. So that's, about 8 months after he split with Danica, which, no shade, just facts. Okay, so here's another April. So April of this year, 2021, he gets to live a bit of a dream come true and be the host for 2 weeks on Jeopardy. Jeopardy was cycling through lots of different people trying to replace Alex Trebek. He just was obviously lit up by the opportunity. He went on Celebrity Jeopardy, won it, seemed pretty easily. Grew up watching it. It was, as he described it, a dream come true. Again, for as private of an individual as this guy is, that's probably the most excited we're ever going to see him. In May, he exercises his freedom to skip the mandatory training camp that the Packers were having, where he was scheduled to make a apparently $500,000. And he also was assigned a fine of about $100,000 that had a little thing on it. So who knows exactly how much the fine was, but it seemed like there was a fine. So he exercised his freedom to forfeit $600,000 thereabouts. This I really draw out because I feel like it emphasizes once again that like his personal belief system is what's driving him, not any kind of like material gain or trying to measure up according to society. Like he is doing what's right for him. And so he spent that time at the Kentucky Derby and then he went to Hawaii. So, you know, good on him. Apparently, somewhere along the way, he and the Packers patched things up because on August 26th, this is where he gave the now infamous press conference where he said, yeah, I've been immunized. Here, I want to play the whole clip. So show you the follow-up questions and him elaborating because there are people out there, you know, spent this whole week looking at other people talk about him and him talking about himself. And there are people out there who are mad because they feel like not only did he lie, but then afterwards he was asked a follow-up question and he lied some more. You know, I'm going to play the whole thing, the whole chunk where they're talking about this, and you guys can make your own conclusions.
Aaron, without getting into the personal choice thing about that, from a football perspective, you know, Kirk Cousins is talking about how he's like in a hermetically sealed box or something in the quarterback room. The Patriots appear frustrated with Cam Newton because he hasn't. From a football and competitive standpoint, was that important to make sure that you're always, you know, that you're most likely going to be available? And I don't know, maybe even from an example setting standpoint?
No, I mean, no, I don't know. I mean, it wasn't about that at all. I think, you know, I like to learn about everything that I'm doing, and you know, there was a lot of research that even went into that, but you know, there's been, like I said, there's been people that have tested positive. I think it's only vaccinated people here, so you know, it's going to be interesting to see how things work moving forward. Obviously, there could be some issues with, you know, vaccinated people only testing every other couple weeks and then non-vaccinated testing every day. Last year, I felt like, I think I read something about this, it was more difficult maybe to pull a guy out who might have tested positive on game day. I don't think that'll be the issue with somebody who's not vaccinated, but you know, it is interesting to see how things are played out. I think there's been a lot of conversation around it, and just in talking with JC, I think this is going to continue to evolve as we get into the season.
On November 3rd, is when he tested positive for COVID, so that's where the cat's out of the bag. He never got vaccinated, and according to, I'm not sure if it's the NFL's rules or the Packers rules, but either way, if you're not vaccinated, you got to sit out for 10 days, which meant that he would miss the game against the Kansas City Chiefs. And listening to the sports commentators like talking about this, and they're all outraged and just in a tizzy, it sounded like the reason they were the most mad is because he was gonna miss the Chiefs game, and like maybe that hurts our chances. I'm like, he's a fucking human being, guys. Like, Jesus, like, oh my goodness. It's just funny. Also, this is where basically everyone and their mom is taking a stand about him lying, or if, you know, there's a lot of like anti-vaxxers out there who are also like, oh yeah, like cheering him on, and like everybody wanting to like take one side or the other and weigh in with their opinion about his behavior and what he's done. And that brings us up to date. So he's currently engaged. The Packers are having a really decent season. They won yesterday. I'm recording this on a Nope, make that 2 days ago. I'm recording this on a Tuesday. Lost track of what day it is there just for a second. And yeah, so wishing all my new friends on the Green Bay Packers the best of luck. Here's where we'll switch over to taking a quick look at his charts. Aaron Rodgers was born December 2nd, 1983 at 2:50 p.m. in Chico, California, and that makes this his natal chart. Also using the Placidus houses, if you're familiar, there's lots of different ways to cast a natal chart, so this is just the way that I prefer. Right off the bat, I mean, obviously this cluster of planets stands out, where he's got a couple planets here in Libra, a few planets here in Scorpio, and then a lot going on in Sagittarius. And like we said, we have handpicked him as a super Sagittarian. So thank you, Aaron, for selecting your Sagittarius stellium. Stellium just means that there's multiple planets hanging out there together. Yeah, so that gives him a pretty heavy concentration of energy in just a few of the signs. You see, he has a lot of the signs where there's no planets there. That doesn't mean that we don't have those energies inside of us. It just means that they're not as pronounced as the energies where you do see that there's a symbol indicating that you have some sort of evolutionary mission happening inside that sign. So he's got all of that going on in Libra, Scorpio, and Sagittarius, and then his North Node in Gemini and his Chiron in Taurus, along with his Ascendant. So that is his natal chart, and next we will take a look at his human design. So human design is also based on the placements of the planets at the time of the person's birth. So that's all you need to cast either one of these charts is the birthday, the time, and the physical location. So that makes this his human design chart. With our human design chart, it's really a picture of how our unique energy is wired inside of our vessel. So each of us has our own unique energetic imprint based on where the planets and everything was at the moment of your birth, the moment that you made entry into this life. These charts, both human design and your natal chart, both work as a map of your soul and the way that you intended to live once you got here. All of these, symbols and indicators, they have a range of possibilities. There's high frequencies and low frequencies. And the act of exploring our own energy is a lot what it seems like Aaron Rodgers' energy is designed to do, is kind of like feel your way through this world and decide what's right for you. There is obviously a lot with both of these charts as far as different pieces that we could talk about. And generally, when I work one-on-one with someone, it takes around 12 hours of coaching time to unpack the entire natal chart, and then probably about as long to unpack the whole human design chart. So to think that we're going to be able to cover everything in the next, however long this video is, that's obviously not going to happen. So I am going to pick out the pieces that are especially interesting given what we know about how he has lived his life so far. By the way, if I look a little different, that's because it's actually 2 days later. I was gonna finish recording yesterday, but then there were 80-mile-an-hour winds. Obviously not meant to be. Something new that I'm trying as far as relaxing into this process of letting these videos bring themselves together versus me trying to force it all to fit. And as I took this break between recording, there were new insights and new pieces that I added to the part that I have left to record. So that's why I can't really tell you when these videos will come out, but just know behind the scenes, that's what I'm working on, is more videos like this. So again, if you have anybody that you'd like to see me cover, put it in the comment. Before we get into his unique energy, I do want to say some things about our unique energy as individuals in general. So Aaron Rodgers is just one individual. We all are individuals. We are all individual souls who came forward for a reason. Each and every single one of us had our own reason. And when we look at things like these soul maps or the natal chart, the human design chart, the goal is to understand what tools did you stock into your toolbox. Each and every one of us is wired differently. And I personally believe, this is how I keep myself sane, that we selected our point of entry. We selected the birth time, the birthplace, the family that we came into, the year, the day, the minute, the second. We chose it because we wanted this astrological imprint. We wanted the planets and the luminaries, the sun and the moon. We wanted it all to be at a certain configuration, and that configuration was our toolkit. that we intended to bring with us and employ here in this earth realm. Then, based on how we're all wired so differently, our expression of our uniqueness and our individuality, like it ends up looking very different. We all explore ourselves in very different ways. You know, Sagittarius energy is having its way with us whether we know it or not. We're living life experiences, we're having reactions, we're exercising our beliefs on a daily basis, whether we know it or not. This, what we're going to talk about as far as like understanding Aaron's natal chart and his human design chart and the elements that we can learn from that. And in my mind, you know, I'm a project manager by trade, technically. It's like a begin with the end in mind. Like if you look at the tools that you brought with you, that you intended to like do this divine work. These tools are perfect for this divine work. And then you work your way backwards to like, okay, well, if those are the tools, then what must the job be? And that's what we're going to find in his chart. We're going to study the evolutionary purpose that his soul is carrying. And we can understand that just by looking at the tools that he put in his toolbox. Every single one of us has a toolbox and has brilliances. There's a quote that I absolutely love. I think it's Albert Einstein that said, if you judge a fish his whole life by his ability to climb a tree, he will always believe that he is stupid. And that just lands somewhere down in the pit of my stomach in terms of part of my evolutionary purpose on this planet is to help people see their own unique brilliance, their own evolutionary potential, their own personal power. Every single one of us has personal power within us. It's a matter of accessing it. It's a matter of owning it for yourself, like claiming it, laying claim to this is mine, and then operating like this is mine. Like everybody thinks, oh, I want to win the lottery and all of that. And it's like, yeah, I mean, you could. It's not what you think it is, based on all the people whose lives fall apart after they win the lottery. Really, what we're looking for in terms of winning the lottery is to feel secure. We want to feel like that endless, limitless security. That's an internal feeling that as we study the tools in our toolbox and we assess them to be powerful and valuable, and we see the utter potential, the creative potential of the energy that we're carrying right now. Not that somebody that you need to become, not things that you need to study and learn and get better at, and I need to stop doing that. None of that. The person that you are right now has such powerful abilities in this world, just based on simply how your energy is put together. So that's what we can see from these charts of Aaron Rodgers and compare back to his life. But ultimately, it is such a practice of each of us doing this for ourselves. So I do hope this conversation kind of opens up a space where you can put your own natal chart, you can put your own experience of Scorpio energy or Sagittarius energy, whatever we're going to get into, and really use it as a mirror to kind of connect with these themes inside of yourself. Ultimately, at the end of the day, security, true security, is an internal game about feeling good about who you are, feeling sure that you have value to bring to this world. And when you know that, when you know yourself well enough to see where your superpowers are, where your flaws are too, but your superpowers, the things that, yeah, I am good at that. Without even trying, I just am good at that. When you know those things for yourself, you carry yourself differently. And it really is like winning the emotional lottery. That's what this work is really all about for me. And so as we kind of get into the conversation, I did just want to open it up with that. So thank you so much for hearing me out with those thoughts. Aaron Rodgers, ladies and gentlemen, his unique energy. What was he born with? What tools did he put in his toolbox? There are plenty, like for all of us. This is where we are going to take the pieces of his natal chart, the pieces of his human design chart that fit well and help explain the life path that we've seen so far with him. Thank you for bearing with me and for feeling these pieces that are being highlighted again as maybe something that I know for me studying Aaron Rodgers, it really was a mirror. I got to experience his energy and I got to grow through experiencing his energy. So I do wish the same thing for you. The very first thing that I do have to start with his energy, and there's a way to see it in his human design profile where he is a 5-1 profile in human design. There is also a way to see it in his natal chart. He has a Scorpio descendant, and then he also has several planets on his descendant, which basically act as a magnet to like draw you in. And so he's got this projection field. And if you're not familiar with projection, this is his greatest accomplishment to date, is him illuminating how projection works, how it looks like when it's working, when someone is having that effect on us. What does that look like? What does that feel like? Projection, very, very simply, is when someone leaves an opening. They don't explain something. So let's just say there's a question mark hanging in the air. Projection is the act of me taking my own knowledge, my own experiences, my own biases, my own prejudices, and like filling it into that space that he has left. He didn't say, he didn't clarify, he left it open-ended. So without even really thinking about it, I take and I fill that unknown. That's really kind of where this comes from, as an evolutionary. It serves our evolution, and then we get to a certain point where we're evolved beyond needing to do that, and we're still doing it. So it kind of hurts our process of spiritual evolution, or it at least gives us kind of fodder for the mill, like logs to throw on the fire, as far as like we're never done really spiritually expanding. So projection, it's such an unconscious process. On my behalf, I have to say I am guilty of projecting onto Aaron Rodgers. I think we all are, because he carries this energy where that is really his gift. He's holding up a mirror for you. It's not about who he is and what he thinks and what he's doing with his life. People get really mad at these kinds of people, or they love them. And honestly, the people that love you when you carry this energy, they're the ones to really watch out for, because when you disappoint them, the distance between who they thought you were and who you actually turned out to be, there's like homicides that happen because disappointed expectations. And that's a projection. That's a putting your version of who the person is onto them, instead of leaving it open-ended to let that person reveal themselves. As I was studying him, I fell guilty to this. I didn't realize that I had projected onto him until he was giving an interview. This was after the whole, he wasn't vaccinated and he got COVID and like all the things came out. Like after he was better, he went on the Pat McAfee show, kind of gave his side of the story for a good long while. He has like a 15-minute discussion with, I guess, Pat McAfee is that other guy. And so anyways, so he's talking about how, for starters, he didn't get vaccinated because he's allergic to some of the things in those original vaccines. And even beyond that, his learning about it and his feeling his way through it, he just really like doesn't want to, like doesn't blah, blah, blah. And so he's like talking about, you know, we all have the freedom for independent thought, and he really likes that, and he believes in body autonomy and all of that. And I'm like cheering him on, like, I'm right there with you, Aaron, like, yeah, go guy, go. And then he says that he was like taking advice from Joe Rogan. I was instantly sick to my stomach. I was instantly like so mad and so disappointed. Like, how could you do this? How could you like Joe Rogan? And before you jump to conclusions about where I'm coming from with all of this, Joe Rogan like literally traumatized me. I was a child growing up in the 90s, and Fear Factor was not a service to my consciousness. Like, it was terrifying and gave me nightmares, like, basically for my whole life. Joe Rogan and I, we parted ways a long time ago, and from there, I just really can't even entertain anything that he has to do with anything. So as soon as Aaron got linked through him mentioning that he was listening to Joe Rogan's podcast and he made some good points and that sounded like resonated as true for him, which is totally his freedom, totally his right. And I believe that. I walk that talk, or I try to. And so when I got mad that he was like a fan of Joe Rogan, I was like, holy shit, like, look, I did it. Like, I let myself project onto him who I thought he was. And when he stepped outside those lines, I was mad. I was so mad that he didn't share my distaste for Joe Rogan, because Joe Rogan is a terrifying individual, or at least he was back in his Fear Factor days. But anywho, so like going back to that evolutionary skill that has kept us alive and has served our survival, it is an unconscious survival response to clear away unknown things and fill them with known things. It's a very vulnerable feeling to not know. And instead of facing the vulnerable unknown that you just don't know, you rush subconsciously to fill in so that you can proceed with feeling whatever way you're feeling then about the projection. And the interesting thing is like, okay, so this whole thing is just a mirror, right? Like he's just holding up a mirror where we get to see what then? Ourselves. Like when we project, we take us and put it in his unknown spaces. And then when he does something that like steps outside the lines of who we are, who we would choose to be, then we're mad because no, you were like me. We had that all squared away. And so it is just so funny to watch the ones who are the most mad at him. You really just got to sit back and wonder, like the people who push the hardest against Aaron Rodgers. And by that, I do mean the fans that are mad that about the vaccination lie, the sports commentators, his parents, ex-relationships, the people who push the hardest against him, they are pushing so hard and their reaction is so big that you just got to wonder, what are they seeing in that mirror? Right? Like he's holding up a mirror to each of us, and there's some of us who are really going after him. I was listening to some of the different sports commentators, like the one that just keeps coming back is like lost all respect for him. And I'm like, wow, what an extreme reaction to have. It's just interesting that someone would feel so strongly about someone else's life and someone else's choices. And again, coming back to, it really does sound like the bulk of the anger is that he's like putting Green Bay's season in jeopardy. That like, he's hurting their chances by having to be benched, that's why we're mad at him. I could get on a whole soapbox about how that's conditional love. Like needing the monkey to dance before you'll love the monkey. Monkey, why are you not dancing? Dance, monkey. We agreed you would dance and you need to dance, otherwise I'm mad. Projection. So the reason I spend so much time to really paint this picture and use him as this example is because lately the last few clients that I have attracted to me who have shown up in my orbit, in my practice, in my readings of one-on-one services have also had these same energetic signatures. They were 5-1s in human design. They have all of these planets opposite their descendant. Like these signatures are out there in so many people. And especially right now through COVID and especially through the vaccination, it feels like COVID and then the masks was kind of like an elevation of the argument. And now vaccines is like a whole nother elevation of the argument. And there are so many people on both sides, all sides, right? It's not just two, it's all sides who are just so mad. They're just so angry and like looking for a fight. And so these people who are so angry at Aaron Rodgers over lying about his vaccination status and even mad that he's not vaccinated to begin with, like, what are they seeing in that mirror? Food for thought. Like I said, I don't peddle conclusions. Just food for thought, just planting seeds. Carry on. So I also have to give a quick plug to this guy, Stephen Forrest. His website is stephenforrestastrology.com. Also, these are the 4 books that I rely heavily on in my practice of studying the evolutionary intent behind all of the different astrology archetypes. So if you're interested, these are the books that I am drawing from, plus my intuition, which is added to that. And I have studied lots of different perspectives around astrology and different ways to interpret what's there. I gotta say, his stuff resonates the most with me personally. This is probably the part that I've been most looking forward to, is this discussion. I'm gonna hold this because it feels nice in my paws. This discussion around Aaron's Sagittarius energy and his 8th house stellium. There's no such thing as normal or whatever, but I would say based on the few hundred charts that I've ever looked at, which isn't a lot, I gotta think, it is somewhat rare to see this many items in one sign inside one house. Real quick tidbit about how the houses work, because makes it even more interesting, is that rising sign, the AC line, it changes sign once every 2 hours or so. So when we say that we timed our birth down to the minute is controlling where the first house, where the rising sign is in terms of the zodiac wheel. It's always right there on the sign that was rising at the moment of your birth on the eastern horizon. That's the sign that's there. And then from there, all the different house positions are calculated. They just are based on the moment you were born, set your rising sign, and the houses follow. So when we look at his chart to see that not only does he have this clump of energy inside Sagittarius, but he timed his birth down to the minute so that it all fell inside his 8th house, which is actually ruled by Scorpio. And we're going to get all into how all of this is interconnected. But we do got to take it one thread at a time. So you guys hanging out with me, I'm honored. To look at this Sagittarius 8th house stellium, we are going to have to break it apart one piece at a time. And then from there, once we've laid the groundwork, we can put it all back together using intuition as the glue that holds it, right? It's all just feeling our way through it. Let's take the 8th house first, because this is the part where this does not fit necessarily. It's an interesting placement, very interesting. It doesn't fit with Sagittarius. The 8th house is ruled by Scorpio. So when we talk about 8th house themes, typically we're looking at something more like scorpionic energy, but basically we can understand these sign and house placements as like the sign is how we feel, it's who we are, it's our personality, the way our personality is wired. And then the houses are different areas of your life. So it's like, which area of your life is this heavy Sagittarius energy? Where's it going to come out? Where's the outlet for you to flow this in your life? And the different houses are things like, your home, your private home, where only trusted individuals are allowed in there. There's the house of our creativity, the house of our career, the house of our spiritual path, the house of our connectedness with mass consciousness and the non-physical energy of all that is through things like our dream state and astral travel while we're sleeping. There are houses that go through all of these things in the natal chart. So for him to put all of that Sagittarius energy inside his 8th house is a very interesting choice, because the 8th house represents 3 things. Like if you walk away with 3 things, like 3 keywords for the 8th house: sex, death, and the occult. Occult meaning paranormal experiences, things that you cannot explain through physical definition, supernatural things that happen, they happen and we perceive them, and like, WTF, like, what am I supposed to do with that? Because there's no physical explanation. The 8th house, like, houses are also action oriented. So it's like the behavior, what does that actually look like when you turn it into living your life? The thing with the 8th house, and when you look back at the sex, death, and occult, the thing that they all have in common is fear. So the real root of the 8th house is fear. And when you have heavy 8th house placements for yourself, and Aaron's got a whole stack, a whole stack of placements, your evolutionary path through life is done through facing your worst fears and surviving, coming out the other side, bellying up to the bar, taking whatever the universe has to give you and working through it, living through it. Sex. It's easy to have sex. It's difficult to have sex in an 8th house kind of way, where we're talking like naked intimacy, like full-blown, authentic sexual expression, uninhibited. Like, I would argue probably most people don't have sex like that. They are thinking about, like, what does my stomach look like? And like, does he like this? And what's she thinking? And like, why did she make that sound? And like, that's obviously not 8th house sex, like what I'm talking about, where like 2 souls merge energetically. That would be 8th house sex. So talk about scary. We're talking about, like, you got to be 100% open and vulnerable to another human being in order to have that kind of 8th house sexual experience. So the emotional vulnerability is really why sex is scary. And then you have death, which humans have a weird relationship with death. I guess it makes sense when you're only defining things in terms of physical, but as soon as you open yourself up to what's really going on, all this non-physical energy that basically it interconnects every single life force that ever existed or will ever exist through this experience that we have of time, where time doesn't really exist. You can see, like, you can get off in a tangent real quick when you open yourself up to energy cannot be created or destroyed. Like, that is a physical fact that scientists, they agree on. That's truth. Energy cannot be created or destroyed. So where do we go when we die? Where does our energy go? Well, I personally believe that your non-physical energy, the part that's like your soul that's animating your vessel, it reemerges with non-physical energy. And that non-physical energy is around all of us all the time. All the time. So again, with heavy 8th house placements, you're going to face a lot of death because death wakes you up to the fact that we don't really leave. We don't go anywhere. If anything, like when our loved ones pass, they're even more accessible to us as soon as we tune into them vibrationally and open our awareness and let them come. Again, this is very scary stuff. This is where, like, opening yourself up and being vulnerable to the unknown like that is just one of the scariest things that people can face. People are more scared of public speaking than they are of death. And there's a reason for that, because it's a vulnerable thing to be the center of attention, all eyes on you. It's a lot of pressure. So there's a reason that these things are scary and that fear is an evolutionary tool. Fear is nothing more than a really uncomfortable emotion. In our effort to shut down our fear, we actually shut down our entire energy. We can't, Brene Brown says, like, you can't selectively numb emotion, and fear is an emotion. So, yeah, facing fears. When you feel afraid, turn into it. Do it. Let the fear guide you forward on your path. The thing that you're afraid to do that. And that's the beauty and the magic of working with the 8th house. And there's a lot of people in this world that are really scared to step into that. And I don't blame them at all. It's an unknown. And unknown is scary. And we already talked about why we as humans, like, we need to fill in the unknown, because when you don't, it jumps up and bites you on the ass and then you die. So it's like a survival instinct that's like hard programmed into the core of who we are, to fill in the unknown with the known, the certain. But in the 8th house, like, you can't. You have to come face to face with your worst fears, which is unknown, emotional vulnerability, losing something that you thought you couldn't live without. And through going through those experiences, you see a whole different side of yourself. And that's where, stepping back into Sagittarius then as an archetype, which we've already touched on a lot. So here I'll just kind of hit the high points of Sagittarius thrives off of life experience, and very, like, intuitively, when you connect Sagittarius in the 8th house, like, life experiences of the type of facing your fears. Like, that's how that reads to me. And from those life experiences that are opening you up, and they're showing you a side of yourself that you were terrified to even face, but in the facing of it, you're not just opening yourself up to fear, you're opening yourself up to, like, what's on the other side of that fear. Again, everybody wants to win the lottery, but people don't want to face their fears. And, like, that is winning the lottery, because when you go towards the fear instead of running away from it, the evolution that happens, the expansion that happens, the confidence in yourself, the dignity that comes with knowing you are a strong warrior who can look fear in the face and stare it down and do what you need to do to get through it. There's such power in that. And with that, like, that's very 8th house as well, is like, the 8th house side of it is mystical powers that come when you're willing to face these realms that you're afraid of, these realities that you're afraid of. You are rewarded. Again, we can't selectively numb. So the fear is coming through and it feels so powerful. And so many of us are, like, paralyzed and we just try to block it off. But that same channel is where inspiration comes from, and love comes from, and connection with source energy that fills you up and beyond, overflowing source energy that just then gets poured on every single person you meet. When you're willing to face your fears, you're opening up your own channel of emotion even wider. And the things that come to us through our emotions are too long to list in this video. It's magic. It's knowing, it's sensing on a whole nother level. It's our intuition. It's our hunches. It's our fear that guides us, the emotions that guide us. So 8th house planets they tend to provoke a lot of fear into the person's life and a lot of like living of the worst nightmare kind of thing, which again, as we look backwards at his evolution, like he tends to have to go through a really traumatic experience of facing his fears and then he gets to move on. So he has an evolutionary tie with that. The other piece that I do want to touch on there is the evolutionary tie with the sex side of it. His sexuality is a guide for him through evolving through his life. And this is true for anybody with 8th house planets. It's like part of your mission is to lean into your authentic sexuality. And that is, again, very scary because if you're even this much kinky, you're worried that like whoever you're trying to like release your kink to isn't gonna like it. They're gonna judge it and like it feels so personal. I've never told anybody this. And then you're just worried that it's gonna be rejected. So you keep it in. And the more 8th house planets you have, the less your life can work and you keep your authentic sexuality on the inside. For balance, you have to let the authentic sexual energy flow. And it's only in that flow, same thing as like we can't selectively numb emotions. Like if you're numbing your own sexuality or if you're inhibiting your own sexual energy flow, then the rest of your energy can't flow either. So it's so interconnected. All of these things of facing his fears around lots of different subjects, I'm guessing, and then the Sagittarius side of it, of living those experiences, letting them open him up to questioning and feeling for himself what's true and resonating with where do I go from here then? What do I know about myself and the world? And how can I use that to line my life up more with who I was born to be? Not exactly a small task to come forward with this energy. Like there is a lot of work to do here. And a lot of it is really emotionally painful. But same thing, the more you put into something, the more you're going to get out of it. So the more fields you plant, the more harvest you're going to have to reap at the end of it. So what's possible with that Sagittarius 8th house combination is one, eternal expansion, like just crazy expansion, where every single life experience that he lives is expanding him a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more. His beliefs quickly pivot one little piece at a time with every single life experience that he lives. And so much of that path is inside those very intimate relationships, those very intimate settings where he is showing his most authentic self. And again, like that's scary for a lot of reasons. Most people can't hack it. And he's basically got to. He's got no choice. So that's the tool that's in his toolbox. Like going back to understanding like what divine work did you come here to do? He came to face these things and to show himself, like prove himself to himself that there really isn't anything in this earthly plane that can hurt us. There really isn't. You can't take your earthly possessions with you when you leave. All that we have is our spirit and our connection to our higher self, our connection back into the interconnectedness of all things. That's really all we have right now. And after we transition back to non-physical, his own spiritual evolution plus his service to the collective is a lot tied to him embracing his deepest, most vulnerable, authentic self and releasing that to not the whole world necessarily, because inside the 8th house, again, we're talking about a very intimate setting where you are deeply trusting this person not to hurt you because you are taking off every ounce of armor that you have. And granted, most of us, as we walk through life, like we are piling on the armor so that no one really sees who we are and what we're going through. That's fine for him to do on a regular basis, but when he goes home to his loved one, his whoever is his like intimate sexual partner, he's got to take that armor off and he has to be seen. Yeah, that takes time. It takes time to work yourself up into trusting your own resiliency enough to be able to do that. Again, interesting going back to his dating history with he doesn't stay single for very long. That makes sense to me in this context because so much of his evolutionary path happens inside that sexual, intimate relationship. And I would imagine he, like a lot of us, has learned the lesson that like sex does not equal intimacy. So when you have sex with someone that you don't even care about, it's just not the same thing. So like you have to get into a committed relationship for those moments to even be possible. So the fact that he kind of goes from one relationship to the next, like, he kind of needs to. So, okay, cool. Like that's helpful to understand maybe. One thing I want to add real quick before we go through his Sagittarius placements. So Sagittarius is all about our belief system, our own personal philosophy about life, and there's another side. Ooh, this is good. Okay, so there's two things that I want to bring in here. So first is when we update our belief system because of something that we live, it's not just a matter of, okay, here's my new belief. You got to think like there's also an act of like energetically releasing your current belief, right? So there's a belief that's taking up that space, and we live a life experience that contradicts this belief. Now, I thought it was like this, but I just experienced something that was different. So now I need to figure out, like, what do I believe now? And that's kind of that Sagittarius process. So let's say you've now lived this experience where this happened, and I can't deny my own experience and stick to these beliefs just because, I had them before. You got to let go of that and then move into the new belief system. The other piece was the eighth house symbolism, and this also kind of ties back to Scorpio, is the phoenix rising from the ashes. So those types of transformation that happen when we face our fears are very much like there was a version of you who existed who held the fear, and then as you walk into the fear, there is a transformation, an all chemical, like DNA level transformation that takes place where the person who you were before you faced the fear no longer exists. You're not that person anymore. You're now this person, because this person isn't afraid of what that person was afraid of. This person has the knowledge that you can face that fear and you overcame it. You did it. So this person is fundamentally different. Again, will carry themselves in a different way. Again, when you combine his Sagittarius and his eighth house, it's a very fascinating combination and a very emotionally traumatic path through which he ultimately has like radical abilities in terms of sniffing out his own biases, his own flawed perceptions, with living life and taking truth from every single thing that he goes through and updating his own perceptions, like rooting out his own biases and letting them go so that his perception is as pure as it possibly can be. There is so much potential for wisdom, and we'll talk more as we get into his Taurus Chiron and his North Node in Gemini. He has like this eighth house Sagittarius stellium, which is going to feel a lot, based on what's there, it's going to feel a lot like natural ability. It is such a big piece of who he came here to be, but at the same time, how to evolve and be even more powerful with this is actually to work on the counterpart, the Taurus and Gemini part. So that's where the whole chart, like you can't ever just take one piece of it, because really to improve his like psychic abilities, for lack of a better word, his natural ability to sense this non-physical realm that I'm talking about, these non-physical energies that are always present. And the more he allows himself to open, the more life experiences he will have that will just open him up even more. So there's eternal potential for opening and widening. And in order to really maximize how good and open you really are, the other end of the spectrum is where we go, which is so fun, I think. Counterintuitive as far as how to read the natal chart, how to like sharpen your tools and how to get better at mastering your craft, and to understand the way that these energies, these 12 zodiac energies, how they balance each other and how they all contribute to being part of one balanced whole. So now we will go through each of his placements in Sagittarius. We'll just start at the beginning. I was just looking at his Sagittarius stellium again, and it is just stacked with like natural ability that like all he's got to do is open himself up to it, and it is all right there. And it's such a cool example of, and hell, maybe he already has, I don't know. But it's such a cool example of like these energies, they just exist inside of us. And it's not ever a matter of like getting better. It's just a matter of like turning inward and tapping into who we really are and the richness of the superpowers we already possess. First, his first placement in Sagittarius is Uranus. And Uranus is a generational planet. So it was in Sagittarius for quite a while. Each planet, each symbol that we see in the natal chart is its own archetype, is its own side of our personality. We are all literally multifaceted beings, and within each one of those facets, there's a range of possibilities from negative to positive. And depending on our overall mix of energy and how our life is going or how we perceive our life to be going, that energy expresses itself in a number of different ways. I don't even know why I was talking about this. Yes, because planets are different sides. They are part of how those different facets come together to create a whole. So Uranus is our rebel spirit. It is the part of us that genuinely all it wants is for us to be 100% uniquely empowered as our own self. The soul that we came forward to be, the part of us that had a mission before we ever like got our incarnation together and we came forward and got our vessel, and now we're growing up and we're honing our craft and we're doing our work as best we can remember what our work was even supposed to be. Uranus is the part of us that remembers that that person who is my authentic self, she had a reason. She had a really, really, really important reason. And the more I become my authentic self, the more I'm just naturally wired to live out my soul's purpose. So Uranus, the purpose of that in our chart is to kind of like, I mean, in a really helpful way in terms of our evolution, our soul's evolution, which is what we were coming for to begin with. Uranus like puts pressure on us to be our authentic self. So when you put Uranus in Sagittarius, again, it's like the pressure to be authentic and to live a huge variety of life experiences that can help you to figure out who your authentic self is. It's like an urgent mission. Uranus in Sagittarius is said to give you an urgent sense of the finite nature of life, that like this vessel has an expiration date. So like to just like lounge around and be like, well, I think I'll just like do this for 60 years. And when I retire, then I can do that stuff that's really important to me. Uranus and Sagittarius like doesn't, it's really flipped. Like the most important stuff should get done first. The most important things should be high on the list because death is imminent, especially when you add in his 8th house psychic sense for energy. Like there's just an inherent understanding that like you need to get to doing what you came here to do. Sifting and sorting through your life experiences to figure out what you believe, it doesn't take very long before you naturally just have to do that. So the fact that he was questioning his Christian upbringing, we're already seeing that like that was always going to be what happened, you know, like he's born to question and to find what fits best for him. So next in Sagittarius is his sun, and his sun is almost exactly conjunct, meaning next to his Uranus. So that is interesting because Uranus spends about 7 years per sign, so it's moving extremely slowly, but the sun moves 1 degree per day. So the fact that he landed, he came on the day, like the day after, when the sun was right there with Uranus, it just again like explodes this impact that he is here to have on the world and that he can only achieve through living his own experiences, getting rid of the beliefs that don't fit with who he truly is. Not just physical experiences either. That 8th house element is all about those non-physical experiences, like on an emotional plane, on an energetic plane. So when you put the sun, which is kind of the center of our personality, it's like the center of the universe, the center of our natal chart. It is the center, the core of who we are and our divine light, that we, each of us possesses our own spark of why we were coming. And our sun very much encapsulates the energy that we thought, you know, the world needs more of this. And when you look at the true gift of Sagittarius, it's that you are more likely to embody your own personal truth, which is an act of your own freedom, like standing inside your sovereign freedom and people without heavy Sagittarius energy, they're not as inclined to question or to try to step outside the routine structure of what's presented to them. So they don't even necessarily recognize that they have a greater level of freedom beyond what they're exercising until they see somebody like Aaron Rodgers who's like, I do what I want, which is kind of the whole point. So good for him for sticking to his guns and doing what makes sense to him, even if he did get part of his information from Joe Rogan. You know, you got to just let him off the hook for that because he is walking his path. He's being true to himself. And at the end of the day, that is him rising into his own unique energetic design. And that's really what the universe needs from all of us. So, in that sense, you know, this is part of where we can really learn from how he does lean into his Sagittarius energy. So next we have his Jupiter, and Jupiter is actually the ruler of Sagittarius. This is its home placement where it's extremely comfortable. And Jupiter represents our supernatural superpowers, our opportunities for expansion, the energy that we line up with in order to find our way onto the path of our soul's higher expansion. It's almost like the more you lean into your Jupiter sign, the easier your life becomes. More of the wrinkles are smoothed out. The universe is just cooperating with you in a way easier and more fun way, a luckier way. All of those opportunities for expansion, whether it's through the physical plane or through the non-physical plane, they just come to you when you relax into whatever sign your Jupiter is in. Next is his Mercury, and Mercury is said to be in detriment here, meaning it doesn't perform well, which again, like those kinds of words to me just don't have any kind of place inside astrology. But what they mean by that is that Mercury rules Gemini and Sagittarius is the opposite sign. So anytime you have a planet in the sign opposite of where it's at home, it's in detriment. So that just means that it works very differently than how a Mercury in Gemini would work, where Sagittarius is very big picture, it's very optimistic. So, you know, Mercury in Sagittarius, it gives you a very optimistic slant on the world and a very kind of like hopeful nature, which again is very cool, I think. And that you just know that expansion is possible because you've seen enough of it that you know that. Also, when you have Mercury in Sagittarius, there's a tendency to look more at the bigger picture, less on the details. And also it tells you like how to mentally engage the person. So with this placement, it's like he needs to be spending time thinking about his experiences, basically like either having new experiences or kind of reflecting on those experiences to see what did he learn from this, how does it update his belief system, what beliefs need to be let go of, what new beliefs are coming online. Spending time with that. Like I was having a conversation with someone yesterday about how powerful journaling is to engage our Sagittarius energy, where all that matters, the only voice in the room is you telling your experience, what you experienced, and then how you reacted to it, and then what did you take away? What was the point? What did you learn? How are you better now thanks to these things that you've lived? So a daily journaling practice, if you have heavy Sagittarius energy, I highly recommend that you at least try it to step into it because yeah, it's like super empowering to like put your own experience front and center like that. So Mercury also talks about how we convert what we know on the inside to what we're able to express, communicate, share with someone else on the outside. So with his Mercury in the 8th house tells me that, you know, most of the time when we see Aaron Rodgers, we see a very controlled presentation and him just talking about himself and what he knows and what he thinks and all of that. Like, it doesn't come out very often. And I would imagine the 8th house placement has a lot to do with that because Sagittarius Mercury would tend to be a little bit more outspoken, but where it's in the 8th house, that's a very intimate setting. So I would imagine he comes alive a little bit in terms of his self-expression when he is behind closed doors with someone he fully trusts. So Neptune is our spiritual path. It's the energy that we engage with to develop ourselves spiritually. And our spiritual self is one very important component of body, mind, and spirit to get into balance. So our spiritual path is part of a balanced life as far as like each and every single one of us individual souls. So to have Neptune in Sagittarius, again, this is a generational planet. So Neptune was in Sagittarius for many years. And their goal, these people who were born during this time, their goal is to become indoctrinated, meaning they get here and they are introduced to an existing belief structure, which for Aaron makes total sense. He grew up inside Christianity. There are others that I know of that, like several that I know who were Jehovah's Witnesses or Catholic or even just like they grew up on a farm and they were indoctrinated with hard work and agricultural values, and like then the idea of stepping outside of that and expanding beyond it is nope, they're right here. So the first step with Neptune and Sag is to be indoctrinated, and then the spiritual evolutionary process that you're here to do is to wake up out of the indoctrination, find your own truth, embody that, and live that on a daily basis. So, you know, there's varying degrees of success with this Neptune and Sagittarius. I mean, with any Neptune, you're set up for failure. The whole point is that you come into like the grips of what you're trying to free yourself from. And in the act of freeing yourself from whatever it is, whatever sign your Neptune's in this case, Sagittarius, you're freeing yourself from anybody else's belief structure and committing yourself wholeheartedly to only what I resonate with as truth and resonate with immediately. You can feel your truth instantly on a daily basis. That's how I will line up with my life. And that again takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of personal power and conviction and being able to feel your truth and lean into that, even when it's disappointing to other people who feel personally offended or rejected. And really, the evolutionary intent is that, you know, their hurt feelings about it is honestly part of his whole eighth house facing your worst fears. I would imagine his soul on some level has a deep fear of disappointing other people. And yet he has stacked himself with this energy that says, you must go forward and find your authentic self no matter what, even when it's uncomfortable, especially when it's uncomfortable. I mean, it also kind of ties back to that projection field of other people are also kind of helping to perpetuate this disappointment that he's then on the receiving end of. Can't imagine it feels very good, you know, to just be doing what you think feels right, you know, inside your vessel. That's all we really ever have. And then to have the people that, you know, brought you into this world be disappointed in your choices. You know, you're doing your best, and the people you love maybe the most up to that point, they're disappointed. And that's that. So, yeah, that Neptune spiritual path, it's an undeniable one. It's one that Neptune itself rules Pisces. It's very illusory, and it takes a while to feel into your spiritual path, your individual Neptune placement, and see what is a spiritual experience for you. What does that look like? It looks different for everybody depending on what their Neptune placement says about them. And last but not least, for his Sagittarius energy, we are going to talk about his south node. The lunar nodes, north node, south node, take us into a realm of astrology called karmic astrology. So the south node represents our past life experience, and the north node represents our future experience that we were kind of aiming towards. That's the future karma that we were wanting to accumulate during this life. So it's kind of like a set of lessons that you signed up to learn while you're here. There's a couple other planets that work kind of like that. It's a set of lessons. You intended to study this energy, this life area, whatever house it's in. So the south node in Sagittarius in the eighth house represents that in a past life, you had a really traumatic experience around belief structures. Like like the one that just jumped to mind was like, you know, the witches who were burned at the stake back in the day, like several hundred years ago, where they found their authentic belief system. They felt it to be true. And then they were burned alive by their community. You know, there's a quote out there that I really love about why were we taught to fear the witches and not the people who burned them alive? You know, like for real, because that's just like unthinkable. And so it's like that. It's like you were persecuted for your beliefs. You did what you were supposed to do. You found your authentic self and they lit you on fire. So talk about the phoenix rising from the ashes. You're here to do it again. You're here to do that again, basically, but with a twist. So that's where the South Node in the 8th house in Sagittarius, you're here to find your authentic self and to practice this balancing aspect of this North Node in Gemini in the 2nd house. And that is how you basically overcome or transcend the harshness of how it went last time. So, how you find your own belief system and not get burned alive. You know, that the answer is the North Node in Gemini, the North Node in the 2nd house. And that's really true for all of us. So, you know, wherever your nodes are, whatever sign, whatever house, the South Node is a traumatic experience. It also represents a set of gifts, like a natural ability that we possess because we have spent so much time with that energy before. Like, think about those witches who got burned alive. Like, they were able to find their own unique belief system in a time where that was literally going to cost you your life. So, South Node in Sagittarius tells me, like, you've already done this. You've already found your unique belief system before. You have a talent for doing that. And now you're here to learn how to take it to the next level, how to find your unique path, but also not offend other people, not rile them up, not get an angry mob with torches and pitchforks coming after you. So the answer to that, and this is where we'll flip on the other side of the chart, to the North Node in Gemini in the 2nd house. The thing about Gemini is gets a bad rap, you know, right off the bat. I got to say that on behalf of Gemini energy everywhere, which, by the way, we all possess already. So when you have North Node in Gemini, you're here to study the Gemini energy, the range of possibilities. And when we think about Gemini, often we think about talking and chatty and social butterfly and all these friends and maybe flaky and bouncing around from lots of different things like ADD or ADHD. And, you know, none of that is unfair, I'll say. But it actually misses the bigger point of like the highest frequencies of what Gemini energy is listening, actually. So the excitement to share with other people what you know, the talking part, comes because you spent time listening and you received. Gemini is the messenger of the gods. So, in order to receive the message of the gods, you have to let go of what you think and just be present and taking in what is. And that is difficult. Most of us have way too many biases, way too many beliefs, way too many thoughts about exactly what is and what we know and all of that to really be in an open-headed Gemini space where you're letting anything and everything wash through you. And it is a very open, very vulnerable place because you do absorb, you soak up every ounce of mental energy that comes your way. And so through that divine process of listening and soaking up all knowledge, all of it, you don't block off anything. You're open and learning from every single experience that you come across with zero bias, zero filter that's shutting you off from seeing the fullest, openest picture that ever was. And I want to play you this clip where I think this illustrates perfectly his South Node in Sagittarius, which is kind of that karmic debt that you're coming to pay back, something that you wanted to do over. And then the North Node in Gemini is the skill that you need to practice to like really pay back whatever happened on this end.
And I think in general, people and men sometimes have a hard time apologizing.
Sometimes girls do too.
Yeah, definitely do. Didn't want to say that, but yeah.
I'm pretty open.
So just realizing how your energy and your attitude can affect other people. So, you know, you got 63 just alpha ego personalities at work, and that's just the players, not even the coaches. So, you know, apologizing to your teammates can be tough sometimes, or you think it's unnecessary, or maybe I didn't affect that person, you know, like what I'm, but the language of apology is the language of connection and love. And I found some pretty cool when you do apologize to a guy.
When I do?
Well, that doesn't happen a whole lot,
okay.
but when for me, you know, it's one of those uncomfortable things sometimes where you try and sense a situation, how it is energetically, and doing that uncomfortable, like, oh man, I don't feel like I need to apologize. Every time you do, some great
That's how I feel.
energetic thing happens, and I was saying something to a teammate, and I enjoy a good, as you know, a good debate, and we were kind of talking. We got into it, and I felt really good about my point, which I'm sure you're not surprised. But I felt like I was making sense. And,
I mean, if you felt really good about it, that's saying something.
and getting some justification from some other guys who were kind of listening to the conversation. After the conversation, I just thought about it from his perspective, and I thought, man, I hope he didn't feel like I was ganging up on him or trying to belittle him. And
But
I was like,
were you?
No, I was
You're
just
trying
trying
to make a
to.
good
I was
point?
just felt like I was dropping some knowledge at that point.
Why did you need help?
From who?
You said you had all kinds of teammates.
It was more
and-
like they were co-signing. You know, they were like, yeah, you know.
Okay.
And I was like, yeah.
So it was like playing dice and everybody's around in a circle, but instead this was a
Right.
great debate.
So I just said this will be my uncomfortable thing of the day. I'm gonna give him a really, really good apology, even though I don't know if I need to, you know. Like, and I don't want to make things uncomfortable at all, or maybe him be like, hey, stop it, don't apologize, you know. But then I apologize, and it was like it was warranted.
Good.
So I kind of checked myself, like, yeah, okay, good. That was an important thing to follow through on.
This clip is very interesting because to me, it sounds like in the moment, he was very much operating in his South Node, in his Sagittarius South Node of dropping knowledge. And in the aftermath, he realized that what he had done was put up a giant wall of here's what I know and just give the situation what you know. And Gemini is the exact opposite. It's letting the situation wash through you, letting somebody else's opinion or truth or what they did, what they didn't do, like letting it wash through you and not making any kind of emotional judgment about it. Just letting it be and holding it with curiosity and open-mindedness where you're not attached to anything that anybody does or says ever because that's not you. That's not you. You're in here and anything that you take in from the outside world isn't you by definition. So it's like being open. The highest frequency of Gemini is that you are open. You're open to life, whatever that has in store for you. And again, that's a very vulnerable place to be. There are some emotions that you can work with to really follow your North Node in Gemini, if that's you also. And those are amazement, wonder, joy, curiosity, especially inspired curiosity. Like if you're just can't get something out of your mind, you're so curious, like, what makes wind? Why does that happen? And like, Google it. Go learn about it because the pieces that get connected through your curiosity make a patchwork quilt that is your life's purpose. So when you're dealing with Gemini energy, your curiosity is the torch that's lighting the way. And the thing about that is, again, with Gemini energy in its highest form, it is perfectly paying attention to what is. And you can't do that while you're talking. You have to listen and be open to whatever is presenting itself. So there's a security in being able to do that. There's a self-sufficiency in I don't need to speak. I know what I think. I know, what goes on inside of me. I know that anything that my Gemini energy vacuums up from my life, I get to take into my Sagittarius space and I get to decide for myself what works and what doesn't work. I don't need to prove anybody wrong in the moment. So while we're here, we'll also touch on his Chiron in Taurus. Chiron is known as the wounded healer and is another generational planet. So there is a decent sized chunk of people born during these years that they are all carrying this wound. And with Taurus, it's the wound of loss, the wound of basically like not getting in the physical what you think you need to be comfortable, to be surviving, to be taken care of physically, like with your basic survival needs. you're not getting those met. And it is interesting because when Chiron was moving through Taurus, it was the late 70s, early 80s, and it was very much a time of technology gadgets coming onto the scene. So when you're, going to school in the 80s like he was, it's like, who has the newest Nintendo, who has the TV, who has the microwave? I don't know. I wasn't alive then. It's like that's how you figure out like who is the best. It's you're measuring against each other's physical possessions. There's so much more to it than just what you have, but these people grew up in a time when it really, really was looking at the one or two kids who did have the newest gadgets and feeling like you didn't. And so you weren't as good as them. And I got to see how this same I'm not as good. I'm physically inferior. Like the main criticism that you hear of Aaron Rodgers, like especially earlier on, was that he's not athletic. Like he's not athletic enough. Like he doesn't have the same build, he doesn't have the same style. And that is so this Chiron and Taurus playing out, I have to think, where he is getting rejected for something that he was physically born with, his body. Like he can't necessarily change it. He can exercise and work really hard, but he can't have a different body. So there's nothing he can do about it. He's just, you got these cards that you were dealt, and what are you going to do with it? Chiron in Taurus is really about the patchwork quilt that you build with the scraps that you've been given. The scraps that other people said, that's not a valuable scrap. Here, you can have it. That's not good enough. That's not valuable enough. I don't even want it. And you're over here with all these not valuable scraps and trying to put it together into something that is valuable. And when you look at what he has done with his career, I think isn't it exactly that? Here's a clip of him. He's reading off of the draft profile that was made about him, I guess back in 2005. So what all the coaches and everybody had said. And remember, he was supposed to get picked first and he didn't get picked till 24th.
This is actual comments made by Scout's draft profile, Aaron Rodgers.
Gets sacked a lot, doesn't have ability to change the release of the football. Mechanically very rigid. He's a little too short. Never pan out. Too well-schooled, very robotic. Don't become good pro players. Rodgers is the same mold. System quarterback.
Ooh.
Can't create on his own.
Ouch.
Panics under pressure, gets flustered easily.
Wow. What bothers you the most from that profile?
A lot of it. I just know it's more that the funnier things are too well-schooled, like you can be too prepared.
Is that a bad thing?
I guess. Very robotic, but it changes, I think, after a while from kind of that chip on your shoulder to prove everybody wrong to challenge yourself to play at a high level every year, which is a hell of a challenge the older you get.
By the way, Aaron just put that draft profile in his pocket, just letting people know.
So these souls that came during Chiron in Taurus, they are here to show us what real value looks like. They basically redefine how we even decide what's valuable. Because look at what he did. He proved that you can take a not athletic enough body and you can be Super Bowl MVP. That's holy shit. Who saw that coming? Not those guys who passed over him back in 2005, not all the schools who didn't give him a D1 offer back in the day. How many times has he been passed over or made to feel inferior in general? And I even tie that back to his family rift. All of that is in response to that Taurus Chiron, that sense of you have this wound of feeling inferior. And with that wound, this is how Chiron karma works for all of us in our charts all the time. It's when you carry that wound, which we all do somewhere, life can't help but step on it and poke at it and bring it to the surface so you can heal it. Because, like I said, Chiron's the wounded healer. The wound itself never fully heals. We have that drive, that pain to respond to our entire time that we're physical in this vessel. But as we get older and we grow into our wounds, we learn how to heal them. We learn how to make them feel better, even if we can't fully heal them. We make medicine to help ourselves feel better. Think about a burn on your skin and you make a salve that you put it on there and it takes the burn away for a little while. And then in a couple hours, you need to reapply. And okay, now I know how to make this salve that heals burns. So anybody in the world who's been burned, I can help them. I can help them make a salve that can help them feel better, maybe even for the short term, maybe for the long term. You don't know. But that's really the goal of Chiron in our charts and in our psyche, is to connect us back to the suffering of other people. Suffering is not an individual connection, an individual condition. It is something that we all experience, and something that, like, regardless of what political party you subscribe to or what news station you subscribe to, what music you like, all of these things that we feel like, let me find my people, let me find the people that I have common ground with. We all have common ground with all of us. Everybody and their dog and their mother, like every single being on this planet knows suffering. And through that, we have common ground that connects us all. Through that, we have compassion, not only for ourselves and our own suffering, but the suffering of every single person. Because when we know our own pain, we know the pain of other people, and we want to do everything we possibly can to help them feel better, right? Like they say, like the people who hurt the most on the inside are the ones who try the hardest on the outside to help others feel good. And I've watched enough talk about who Aaron is in the locker room and how he does try to connect with these guys and get their head space and their heart space, as I don't know that he uses those words, but he connects with them, and he, helps them to feel seen and heard and like they're part of something. And through that emotional connection, what happens on the field is elevated because of his ability to do that and reach out. And I got to think that, again, his own emotional pain that he's gone through helps him to be conscious, to reach out to the new guys, to guys who maybe had a bad game, they played bad. Reach out and let them know, like, you're still valuable. That one experience does not at all define who you are as a person. So what can we learn from it? What can we learn from that? How can we do better next time? That Sagittarius optimism. So I haven't touched on this yet, but I do want to bring aspects into the conversation. So aspects are all of the lines inside the chart, basically telling you how these planetary placements are talking to each other. So each of the lines represents like a sub conversation that's happening inside your energy field. And I bring this up to point out that he has Chiron opposite his moon. So this line between here is the Chiron opposite moon aspect. And when you Google Chiron opposite moon, it basically talks about how you have a karmic relationship with your mother. And the moon represents the divine mother, the nurturing mother that is inside all of us. But it actually also represents karma with your mother. And the fact that his moon is in his 7th house also tells me that that karma with the mother plays out inside his romantic relationships as well as his business relationships. All carry that same energetic signature, where he's basically learning the same lesson then that he is learning with his mom in all of these relationships and business partnerships. So like every single one of these lines on the chart adds a new element to the discussion. And that's why it takes so long to unpack like all of the different ways that our energy not only exists inside of us, but then how each side of our energy is interacting with all the other sides. It can be a true shit show inside of us sometimes when we've got multiple sides of our personality trying to tug at the reins and trying to pull us in different directions. So yeah, those aspects can be really interesting to dive into as you get a little bit of familiarity under your belt with your natal chart. That's like next level type stuff. So next, we will come back over here to his 6th and 7th houses where he has his Libra and Scorpio planets. So this is a lot to unpack, and so I'm going to try to collapse it down as much as I can and have it still make sense. So with the 6th house, this is our daily work, our daily life, and our experience of our work in our daily lives. So think about it in contrast, like an author who's writing novels. Their career is an author. They publish books. Maybe they're known worldwide for their books and their writing. But the daily experience of being a writer means that you have no schedule. You have no boss breathing down your neck. You have like maybe sweatpants and flip-flops and 18 cups of coffee, and you're trying to like get something onto the page. That's the daily experience of your work. He has planets here in the 6th house. So those planets basically tell me that his focus, his daily routine, his connecting with the people that he cares about on a daily basis and checking in with them. How can he be of service to them? How can he use his skills to be of service to these people that he cares about? That's like not only important, but kind of where he draws his inner peace from. So, like having a routine, having what to expect and who you're going to meet and where you're going to go, and that those people are aligned, that you love them, that you do want to be of service to them, and then getting to actually be of service is very calming and satisfying in a way that is the way it reads intuitively to me is that it's something of a respite from the rest of this shit that is just kind of like plaguing him, like this little cloud that hangs over him that says you must have an emotionally difficult time in life. The sixth house planets that he has and the energy that he has there is almost like a giant exhale. So that's cool. That's cool that he gave himself that little reprieve. The sixth house is also like managing the details and the logistics of getting from point A to point B, whatever that looks like. If that's a goal, if that's a daily task that you want to clean the house. Well, okay, so there's steps and there's details of like all the different pieces that are going to go into cleaning the house. So the sixth house is the place where we break apart, what do we actually need to do? What are the details of that? And this energy that he has here, again, gives him a fairly detail-oriented perspective amidst all of this Sagittarius energy, which is so big picture and honestly self-focused around what feels true for me. And then you add in these sixth house planets where he is extremely detail oriented towards other people and how do I be of service, the most value to these other people that I care about. So it's a very probably helpful balancing element in his energy for him. The sixth house also includes making improvements on your current reality. Again, you see this a lot in his interviews as far as him talking about, like, even when you play bad, all you got to do is learn from it. And even when you play good, all you got to do is learn from it. So, like, that feels very sixth house energy to me of like, no matter how good it is, you can still learn. And then the seventh house is the house of committed partnerships. So not just marriage, but also business partnerships and even some friendships could fall into this space. It's like you have a commitment, you have a shared expectation that you are working jointly towards something, and that's basically what marriage is. That's what a business partner is. That's what your best friend is sometimes, depending on the relationship. It's also, sometimes thought of as the house of love. It's not entirely true because falling in love is more of a fifth house infatuation type process. The seventh house of committed partnerships is where it's the act of being in love. So, take you in sickness and in health, on your good days and your bad days, on, when you're feeling really good and when you're getting pissed at the world. Take the person in all of that and be on the same team and work through whatever comes up. And this is where the seventh house always begins with our descendant, which is opposite the ascendant. That is a point that I mentioned earlier where he has several planets here around his descendant, around the cusp of his seventh house. And this is extra exaggerating what's true for all of us, which is relationships act as a mirror for whatever side and part of ourselves we are ready to come face to face with and heal. That is what your relationship will show you. And again, there are so many people in this world, myself included. I've done this however many times in the past and try to practice not falling victim to it again because it's so easy, is to project all of the relationship issues onto the other person. These things are all their fault. And then you just walk away from that relationship and get into another one. And for me, I also am built to really evolve through relationship. Every single time I was going back into a different relationship or beginning a new relationship, and after about the fourth one, I was like, these are all the same. They're all ending the same way. They all have the same patterns of negative emotion, of blame, of jealousy, of possessiveness, of like all of these things keep playing out one relationship after another. And it's like a lot of people too want to say, but I attract like the worst men, or, I just have a bad habit of attracting like these really awful people to me. Relationships act as a mirror, and that mirror shows you what you're ready to heal right now. So it took me a long time to realize the fact that I'm manifesting the same relationship with all these different people is because these issues that are being played out inside the relationship, they actually exist inside me. I'm half of this relationship, and if I continuously bring my same old shit into all of these different relationships, they will the mirror continues to show you the same thing, right? You're bringing the same energy, it shows you the same thing. Change your energy, release your old baggage, cultivate new energy, take that into a relationship, see how it works out differently. It's so mind blowing to think that, your relationship is reflecting you. It's not the other person. It's so easy to think that it's the other person, but it's not. They're just a mirror. So this is the magic of the seventh house. And this is, where I always like to stop and spend a second, there, myself included. There's this side of us that wants to be together, that wants to be connected to someone or something. And really, it's in balancing our own sense of self and taking full responsibility for the energy that we're carrying and the energy that we're then bringing into this relationship that we want so desperately to have and to get into. The more we cultivate health inside our own energetic space, the more, when we get into a relationship, then the mirror, what it's showing us is a healthy relationship. It's showing us someone who loves us. It's showing us someone who's trustworthy. Like it's easy to think that I'm mad at them because they're not trustworthy. When in fact, what I found out from my own experience was my issue was I did not have the ability to trust. And so, of course, every single person on the face of the planet is untrustworthy. So that's obviously not going to work. If I want a trusting relationship, then I'm going to have to learn how to trust. And the fact that the universe brought me all of these different people that were untrustworthy to help me figure that out, I'm so grateful. And that is, again, the beauty of the seventh house and working with it and getting the most out of it is seeing these people as mirrors, not blaming a single bit of your emotional reaction on anybody else, and sitting in it and using it as a reflection of who you truly are. And if you don't like what you're seeing, then there's some self-work that needs to happen. And I got to tell you, like, once you get started with self-work, you realize it's an internal process. It's a never-ending like work in progress. So it's only just better and better and better. And relationships are a powerful catalyst because they help us measure our progress. They show us where we are. And yeah, I mean, you grow faster inside a relationship than you do by yourself. But most of us, it's an intense process when someone reflects who we truly are, especially if you aren't ready to see that, which is kind of where I was, like going back to these relationships where I'm just possessive and jealous and not trusting and all of these things. But you have to go through it to see the pattern, to see what happens. So the seventh house and those committed partnerships that we draw to us, they are acting as that mirror for us to see, where are we? Where are we in our energetic evolution? Where are we in terms of our relationship with ourselves? Because that's ultimately what your relationship with your partner ends up being, is a dramatized version, an animated version of your relationship with you. It's the same. It's the same relationship that you end up having with somebody else. So if you're uncomfortable by yourself, you will end up being uncomfortable in the relationship that you attract from that space. When you're comfortable and secure inside of who you are, you attract a relationship that is comfortable and secure to be in. So the seventh house is a powerful place where I feel like, myself included, there's a lot of us out there who want to rush into relationship to fill up something inside of ourselves. And I'm not saying that he does this, but there's so much value to the time alone and figuring out, what is my energy? What is mine? so that when you get inside a relationship, you can see when they're reflecting your energy back to you and when they've got their own shit going on, and you can just let them off the hook for their own shit because that's not mine. I know my energy. It's over here. You're doing all that. That's your energy, And that's honestly the beauty of the seventh house is figuring out how to have each person take full responsibility for their emotional experience, their energetic experience, and simply use the other person as a thermometer, as a reflection of where are you. And if you get into a squabble with your significant other, it's time for you to go away and do some self-care and help yourself feel better. And when you feel good, you come together with others who help you feel even better. There's a couple quotes that I want to include here from Stephen Forrest in his books. It would be from the book of Air because we're talking about the seventh house, which is ruled by Libra. So the first quote, "Time spent in the alchemical cauldron of intimacy leaves us wiser than we would be on our own." And the second quote is, "Lead and gold have a lot to learn from each other if they don't kill each other first." So, yeah, it can be real intense and uncomfortable to have your bare naked truth reflected to you in your face. And it's super easy to shoot the messenger. And the seventh house is the place where hopefully you love the person enough that you would never want to kill them, hopefully. And because of that, it's impossible to blame the messenger, and you end up working yourself into a situation where it becomes easier and easier to face that this is me. This is not them. This is me. They're just helping me see that this is a pattern that exists inside of my energy. And that once you give up blaming the other person, that is when you have the opening and the ability to actually heal some of those patterns that maybe don't feel so good. So you also see that he's got a lot of energy happening also here in Scorpio. So along with all of this eighth house energy, which is ruled by Scorpio, he's also got actual Scorpio planets along with his descendant. I think the main thing that I want to start with Scorpio is how private Scorpio energy is. And again, remembering that we each have our own Scorpio facet to our personality. So we all have a need for privacy on some level. We all relate to it in a different way, whatever that looks like for us. Some people don't care that much about their privacy. They're an open book. They want to tell everybody everything. Some people are the exact opposite, and he is one of those, the exact opposite, where he is embodying privacy. Is when you look at Scorpio, it's represented by the scorpion, and the scorpion is a defensive warrior, basically. Like the Scorpio stinger, it is waiting for somebody to attack, and then they have the stinger to like kill whoever's attacking them. And it feels a lot like that. Like Scorpio uses their silence, uses their privacy, uses this wall between them and the rest of the world to like selectively let certain people come in and like see the real them. But even then, you're mostly getting a mirror. You're mostly projecting onto who you think they are. And so with that, because it's like a survival instinct, it's like a survival mechanism, they have this ability to edit themselves and how they present themselves to the world. So this Scorpio descendant basically gives you the ability to say like, this is my private self, and build a giant wall right there. And this is the part of me that I'm willing to let this person see, and this is the part of me that I'm willing to let this person see. And it is a highly edited expression when you're dealing with heavy Scorpio energy, until you get to like an eighth house type situation where you are totally open and vulnerable and honest about your real self, where you take that armor off and you let your true self be seen. With heavy Scorpio energy, almost nobody gets to see the real you, and you save your whole self for these really intimate settings. So again, he doesn't stay single for long because he pretty much needs at least one other person in order to kind of express his own energy. He needs that mirror to show him who he is. He relates to himself through who he is inside the relationship. So there's nothing wrong with that. It's just a different way of evolving. We all have our own unique path that we came here to walk. Also, it's very interesting to point out, kind of tying all the pieces together here, that, he's built to be in a relationship most of the time. Totally true. But also, you got to think about all these people that he's then attracting into these relationships with him. And you look at a few of them, at least that we know of, and they are so intent on mending the bridges between him and his family. And I come back to that again because it's so weird to me that they are so committed to, like, we need to heal the family. Because I just, like, I don't see it that way. Like, I see it as, like, our relationship with our parents is a complicated one. It is, like, the most complicated relationship we have on this planet. So somebody who thinks that they're going to show up 36 years into the game and fix everything, you got to wonder, like, what kind of karma is that person carrying where they need to learn that they can't fix other people's shit? You know, like, that's not how it works. Like, if our relationship is going to improve, it will be because we did the work on the inside of ourselves to bring a better version of ourselves into that relationship. So somebody else thinking that they're going to get involved and, like, sort it all out doesn't work like that. And that's basically what happened, is, like, you know, for all their efforts, basically the relationship just keeps falling apart. And so it's like pushing a boulder up the hill, and, like, you push it and push it and push it and push it and push it, only to sit there and watch it roll all the way back to the bottom. And maybe what you just did all that time that you spent pushing it to the top, like, maybe that didn't matter at all. Maybe it made it worse. Maybe it delayed the eventual outcome, whatever that is. Who knows? I think there's, like, a fixer karmic debt that exists in those types of situations where he's attracting the relationships that are helping him evolve, but also the women who are being attracted into his world are also being, you know, he's holding up a mirror to them too and saying, like, here's who you are. Here's who you are in this world at this time, and let me help you see that, and let me help you come to these conclusions. Like, maybe there are improvements that they wanted to work on that they were able to realize because he was holding up that mirror and that they had that relationship. So there's so much evolutionary potential inside the relationships that we commit to. Scorpionic privacy also brings us back to his creative decisions around how to represent himself in that press conference when he answered the question, have you been vaccinated, with, yeah, I've been immunized. It takes on a whole new meaning when you think about privacy is a defense mechanism. So if he had felt safe to offer his truth in that moment, he would have. And he didn't, because the mob with the pitchforks and the torches were standing on cue, on ready to attack. If he had said no comment, if he had said, no, I'm not vaccinated and I don't think we should have to do that, like, if he gave his full, transparent, honest answer, they would have attacked him. Like, if not physically, at least mentally, intellectually, spiritually, like, they would have called him into question. He would have been eviscerated for his beliefs. And we saw how he's got karma. He's got that South Node in Sagittarius in the 8th house. Like, he's got karma around being villainized for his belief system. So his instinct was to protect himself and was to read the room and say, this is not a safe space to tell my story. So I am going to tell them that, yeah, I've been immunized, because in his mind, maybe that was true. Maybe he felt like, you know, what resonated for him was that he had exposed himself to whatever remedy that he believed was immunizing him. Like, maybe that wasn't really a lie. It was absolutely dodging the question that was asked. But again, when we go back to why do we ever assert our need for privacy, it is to protect ourselves. And that is something that I think each and every single one of us can resonate with. And it brings me also back to the question, should the media be able to just ask him whatever question they want and shove a microphone in his face? And when I say that about him, you know, I mean anybody. Like, he's not just a football player, but he's a football player. Like, does he owe you 100% transparent honesty about the choices and the beliefs that he holds in his personal life? Like, does he owe that to society? Do we expect that we're owed that from him? My voice is getting all high and squeaky because I just can't even wrap my mind around why it's appropriate to ask that question in the first place. If the NFL, if his workplace does not require that he be vaccinated, then I say it's nobody else's business what he chooses to do. And at the end of the day, he got COVID and it came out that he's not vaccinated and he faced up to that. And great. At that point, the truth is unavoidable and he wore it and he lived through the storm and whatever else. But yeah, going back to the day that he lied, he was protecting himself. They did not want to hear the truth. They wanted a yes. And if that's the situation you find yourself in, the next time you are in that situation, see what you do. See if your privacy, your stinger, your little Scorpio stinger pops up to protect you. Because our self-preservation instincts, again, run deep into the core of who we are, especially, like one more time, especially coming back to that South Node in Sagittarius in the 8th house. He was persecuted for his belief system and it did not end well. And now he is wanting to protect himself and wanting to have a better outcome. So he creatively answered the question. And I think what we can all take away from this is something about like not only ourselves, but also the people in our lives that we love. That, you know, if someone you love has lied to you about something, I understand that's not cool. And, you know, of course we should be honest and lying is bad and they teach that to children and all of that. But I'm talking about like the boots on the ground, the actual like living out of getting asked a question that you don't feel safe answering. And so you lie. You sidestep. You do a lie of omission. You mislead the person. You let them assume something that you don't correct. Any of those are self-preservation tactics, and that's Scorpio energy, is our need to wear our armor and protect our deepest, darkest, hardest parts of who we are live inside that Scorpio facet of our energy. So another thing about this heavy Scorpionic energy, it's like if me as an individual, if I'm not ready to face my own truth, then I won't like being around someone with this kind of energy because, again, it's a mirror. It's a mirror for your truth. So if you don't want to see it, then you also don't want to see this person. And that goes back to his relationships with his parents and how, like, it just feels like they kind of rejected him at some point, like his authentic self. You know, I'm sure they would say that we didn't reject him, we love him, we want him back, we want blah, blah, blah. Maybe you want him to fit in a box. Maybe you want him to get back into his box and be a good boy. And, you know, it just feels like they are offended by his authentic self. And that has got to be extremely painful to be on the inside of the mirror suit that shows everybody the truth that they don't want to face. And, you know, like the people who are loudest about their beliefs are the ones that are the most insecure. So to be offended that somebody else doesn't believe the same thing that you believe is your own insecurity in your belief system. It's your own Sagittarius energy telling you need more experiences to shore up these beliefs. You don't really have the experience to justify believing these things. And instead of like putting some unknown and some doubt and some questions inside your belief structure, you get really certain and force other people to get in line so that you can feel better that you've found the right answer. When other people start stepping outside of what you think is true, it causes extra questions and extra doubt about, wait, so have I found the wrong answer? Do I need to rethink everything? Most people aren't ready to answer that question or to let go of their beliefs enough to let something more accurate come into place. So again, those are the ones who get the most mad at somebody else who is living outside of those belief systems. And this happens like not just in religion, honestly, like science and like logical people, like they are just as bad. Like they can be just as much a fundamentalist as a religious person, a religious zealot, right? Like it's anybody who is like so rock solid inside what is true and they are not willing to hear anything outside of what they know to be true. And that's the opposite of Sagittarius energy. And that's why we're talking about this, because here we are in Sagittarius season. So we'll go through his planets just like we did for Sagittarius. Pluto is first. Again, a generational planet. Pluto speaks to past life trauma, no matter where it is in your chart. And it is trying to create a phoenix-like transformation where you are facing something bad that happened in a past life and you are overcoming it, you're transcending it. And just like we said about facing fears, Pluto rules Scorpio and the eighth house, so that's why it might all sound very familiar. When you're facing your fears, it is an alchemical transformation. It's a phoenix-like transformation where the person you were before burns away and now there's a new person. So these are the kinds of achievements and accomplishments, these Pluto transformations. This is the stuff you get to take with you when you pass away from this life, because that's a spiritual accomplishment. That's healing on an energetic plane. And that is the kind of stuff that carries forward into the next life and the next life and the next life. And his Pluto is also in the sixth house. So remember, that goes back to being of service and your work in this world, your daily experience of your work in this world. So his healing and his Scorpio wound is part of the service that he's here to provide to humanity. Pluto, no matter where it's at, is basically coming face to face with your own hell on earth. Whatever sign Pluto is in, you will live out an experience that is the worst possible version of that energy. And like the Neptune placement, where you have to go through the indoctrination first, it's like when you go through kind of a recreation of what the experience was in a past life, in this life, you've brought the tools with you in your toolbox to have a different experience of that same wound. You are rewounded, and through that, you overcome it. You figure out how to heal it, how to be with that energy, how to successfully navigate that space. It really just depends on what sign and what house your Pluto is in. The Descendant, we already touched on a bit. It's always the beginning of the seventh house. It's always opposite the Ascendant. And he has all of these planets here right on his Descendant, meaning they are opposite his Ascendant. And the Ascendant is the rising sign. It's like a stained glass window for your soul to shine through to people who don't know you at all. So when you meet someone for the first time in person, in like a social setting, let's say, they have nothing to go on about who you are. And our rising sign is what begins to paint that picture for them. So that's why the fact that he has these three planets opposite his ascendant, it is literally a magnet. It's a pull, like a suction of, he has all of this energy like brewing under the surface, basically. And so when you meet him, that's the effect that he has. Like, you can even just look in his eyes and you can see that there is so much more going on the inside than anything that he's ever putting on the outside. And it makes us curious. It draws us in. And that's how the projection field gets going, is that we're drawn into this mystery, this unknown, that we don't have any facts about what's really going on in there. And that's when the projections just start dropping in and we don't even realize that we're doing it. So next is his Saturn in Scorpio, and much like his Taurus Chiron, that contributes to this dynamic of him getting passed over and being made to feel physically inferior. This Saturn in Scorpio speaks to like his field of study. Saturn is a field of study that you intended to embark on. And Saturn in Scorpio means that you came to study emotion. You came to study the full range of human emotion. And yeah, pain and fear and vulnerability and discomfort and loss and clinging to something that you think you need to survive and having it ripped away from you and having to go through the aftermath of rebuilding in the wake of losing something that you didn't think you could lose. That is Saturn in Scorpio. Like, that's how you evolve, is by going through these emotionally traumatic events and coming out the other side, the phoenix rising from the ashes. And it is a powerful placement. There is no such thing as, oh, that's a bad placement, that sucks. Like, oh, I wish I didn't have that. Maybe it's a hard one for sure. But just like everything else, the more you put in, the more you get out. So these people, the Saturn and Scorpio people, it spends a couple years per sign. So, his immediate generation has the same placement. But the Saturn and Scorpio people, they came to have every angle, every individual space along the spectrum of human emotion. They came to experience it full force. And through doing that, they will develop radical, I can't even stress this enough, radical emotional intelligence, which he already has. The Scorpio descendant is like a root in emotional intelligence and being able to read other people. But that Saturn in Scorpio is like he will have trial by fire over and over and over and over again. And the more he resists his truth, the harder the trials by fire will be. The more he leans into it, the easier it will become. So all of that is true about that Saturn and Scorpio placement, which I think contributes heavily to, as he moves from one level of his life to the next, it has to be emotionally trying in order for him to really get out of it what he came here to get out of it. The last one is his moon, and this is also a support mechanism of sorts, I feel like, because our moon represents our emotional needs, what we need to indulge ourselves and fill our own cup, and how we make ourselves feel better when we don't feel good. A Scorpio moon is pretty prone to depression and melancholy. And because of that, they have such a rich experience with feeling bad that, again, they tend to develop really strong emotional intelligence and get really good at how to feel good even in the midst of really awful things. And it gives you an ability to, again, look at the truth, even if it's really dark and uncomfortable and ugly, and decide that, the only way out is through. The only way to get out of hell is just to keep on walking. So that's kind of a Scorpio moon mantra. As far as to heal, you have to be willing to face the hard things. So for a Scorpio moon, emotional restoration looks a lot like bare naked truth telling. Like the more you lean into your most authentic truth, your most inner desire and urges, and release that out into the world. In this case, in the seventh house, we're talking about inside the confines of like a committed partnership. The more you do that, the more his cup is full. So Scorpio moon restores themselves in something of an interesting way, but the fact that his moon is in Scorpio with Saturn, where he's intending to study these energies, the fact that that's also then where he goes to restore himself, it's a nice partnership that just means that he's going to have that much more focus and attention on Saturn's work that he did sign up to do. Because Saturn is one where we have to invest in our Saturn every day. Otherwise, if we don't work on our Saturn will work on us. And that's just non-negotiable. We signed that contract before we ever got here. Okay, so last but not least, we are going to wrap up by covering his Libra energy, and then I will leave us with some yummy food for thought, some questions for contemplation. I had to lose a sweater. It's so freaking hot in here. Okay, so Libra and these sixth house planets that he has, these to me feel intuitively like a pressure release valve. Like he is here to do such intense emotional work as a soul. And these placements feel very much like how he keeps himself sane in the middle of all of that. So his sixth house planets consist of Mars, Venus, and Pluto. In Libra, though, is his Mars and Venus. And so when you think about Mars is like kind of representing the divine masculine, and Venus is representing the divine feminine. And he's got both of them in the same sign in the same house. So no real solid conclusions to draw from this, but it is interesting in terms of, like I said at the beginning, like his sexuality and all of that has kind of come into question. So when we think about Libra, it's represented by the balance scales. This idea helps me stick it in my mind of like an ounce of lead weighs the same as an ounce of gold. So at that point, they have found equilibrium. And that's really Libra's gift, is to be able to see all of these different sides to everything. One of the shadow complaints about Libra is that they are indecisive. And I don't think that's really what's going on. I think it's more that they are so overwhelmed by how perceptive they are that they can see all of these different options and all of these different sides to every single option. And they are contemplating all of that wide variety of what they're able to see. And so he's got Venus and Mars in Libra. And when we're talking about Libra and especially Venus, the role of Venus in our natal chart is how we come back to a place of inner peace, inner stillness, how we find our equilibrium point amongst chaotic world and life and all of that. And really these placements, what they give you, you know, what some people might call indecisiveness, is an incredible tolerance for diversity and lots of different options that you can hold in your mind all at once because you're so unattached to needing to find just one. You really do want to take a step back and survey the situation and see every single option that is presenting itself. Also, he mentioned in one of his interviews about how something that he was talking about really helps the health of the locker room. And to me, that feels very much like his Libra, Mars, and Venus, where also in the 6th house of service and being of service to others, he's very sensitive to when anybody is out of balance or when anything is out of balance, and has a keen sense for where and what is out of balance and how to fix it, how to get it back into a state of peaceful calm. And that he's doing that without even really thinking about it. It's just part of his effect that he has on people. The other side of Libra, which I think is very underrated and underestimated, is their aesthetic intelligence. So commonly associated with Libra is beauty and art and all of that kind of stuff. And like they have really good taste and they're usually really good at doing their makeup if they're, you know, wanting to wear makeup. But I wonder how he uses this as far as like being a quarterback. One of his greatest talents when you watch him play is not only does he have this like resistance to pressure from like all of these guys rushing at him, he seems like he's just standing there by himself, not even sweating these guys that are coming. He knows he only has a second or two. His body seems to be just moving to defend him from whoever's coming at him. And his eyes, you can see, is surveying and taking stock of what are all my options. And then in a split second, he seems to decide which is the best option. And then he has like pinpoint accuracy in delivering the football to exactly where he meant to do it. So it is very impressive to think about how that Libran aesthetic intelligence serves you as an athlete. I had never thought about it before I looked at this case. And then also in the researching of this case, I was looking at Patrick Mahomes' chart. He also has a lot of Libra energy. So that aesthetic intelligence to be able to see like which of these options is the most harmonious path forward. He seems to have just like a sixth sense to be able to sense which one is the best option in this time. So going back to the gay rumors and that maybe he's a bad lover, again, I would point instantly back to the projection field and how we are all very easily disappointed by our own expectations. And so how much of this is really him compared to how much of it is fact, like truth. One thing I will say is both the 5-1 and all of those Scorpio planets, plus all of his 8th house planets, that reads textbook wise. Obviously, I've never even met the man in person. It reads like intense sexual energy. So if he's a bad lover, I would say it has more to do with like the foundation in the relationship is missing or not aligned to where he doesn't feel comfortable letting out that sexuality more than he's just bad in bed. Like, I think it probably boils down to like a trust, intimacy, vulnerability type thing where, I mean, his evolutionary path in this 8th house is to like take off all his armor and really present himself to someone. And if he's not doing that, if he's trying to edit down his own sexual energy, it probably is going to be a pretty boring presentation. I got to think that's true for all of us. So that's as much as I'm going to say on that is like, you know, I think the gay rumor thing from what I was able to trace back or my researcher was able to trace back is that in the locker room, he doesn't brag about things that guys are normally bragging about, apparently. Like as a girl, when I heard that that's like why, is that because he just doesn't brag about all the chicks that he slept with and like how big his thing is. And like it just is a really disheartening look into typical macho masculine male behavior, which at that point I'm like grateful that there's men like Aaron Rodgers out there who are above sharing those things. Yeah, refreshing. Let's just put it that way. And if that is the only thing that they have to go on as far as like maybe he's gay, projection field. He doesn't look like what you think he should. He's not doing what you think he should do, so you draw your own conclusions. Projection field. So the other piece, like kind of going back to if he's bad in bed, then that would point more towards something in the foundation of the relationship is not working. And when we talk about Libra, especially Venus and Mars, our divine masculine, our divine feminine, by the way, we all have both of them. Our sexual facet to ourselves is made up of both of those drives, our feminine drive and our masculine drive. And when it comes to Libra energy, that does rule over love, but all kinds of love, not just romantic physical love, but like with your friends, with your siblings, with your pets, with your parents. All of that is Libra love. And really, Libra love has its own evolutionary purpose. And just like with Gemini, we can follow the scent of our curiosity. With Libra, we can follow the scent of what we think is cute, which I think is just adorable. Follow the cuteness. If you have heavy Libra energy, if you're not finding your partner cute, then you most likely will not be sexually attracted to them. That like the cuteness factor, more than just love. Love has so many connotations on what does it mean, what does it not mean, on and on and on. Cuteness. I think you instantly know what I'm talking about. Like, I love the way your nose crinkles when you laugh. And I love how, when you look in the morning and your hair's all fluffed up, you're so cute. Like, that is cuteness. And that cuteness is what Libra love is really all about. Because when we find someone cute, we are more willing to humble ourselves to them. We are more willing to apologize when we're wrong. We're more willing to forgive them when they're wrong. And so that cuteness in Stephen Moore's books, he calls it evolutionary lubricant to get us to mate with each other, basically. So again, when you go back to his sex life and how good is he in bed and all of that, which is none of our business, it does point also back to Libran energy. And if you're not finding the person cute, it's going to be really hard to have a satisfying sexual relationship with that person. And again, I point back to, I find it weird that these couple relationships that we know about were so intent on fixing things between him and his family. And just for me personally, I would have a really hard time finding them cute while they're all up in my business, while they're trying to control the situation, while they're trying to like hammer it out and make it work. That's not cute. That's annoying mostly for me. And I'm obviously projecting my own shit into the middle of all of that. But again, just a different way to look at it. If somebody says that he's bad in bed or that you're bad in bed, if you have similar placements, like you got to think, do you really find this person cute? Are you really attracted to them? And if not, yeah, trying to make a deeper relationship work obviously is not going to work. This is really interesting too when it comes to that Libra and cuteness. It tells us, like biologically, because we don't have any control over who we think is cute. So our reaction of thinking someone is cute tells us who to pay attention to for the highest good of ourselves, for the highest good of our soul's contribution in this world. Who we think is cute guides how we pay attention, and that attention that we pay will score us whatever nuggets that we need for our own personal evolution. So follow the cuteness. How cool is that? So there you have it. That's as much of a deep dive into his charts as I can possibly offer you at this time without us being here for more and more and more hours. So I'll leave you with a few food for thought type questions for consideration and just to kind of hit some of the highlights of what we've covered here. First question of this case that really stood out to me from the very get-go of studying it was, how much information is the media truly owed? We as the public, how much information are we really owed? Do we really deserve to know what his vaccination status is? And like that's, obviously backing it up one step and letting him off the hook for lying long enough to see like, why do we even feel like we are owed an answer from him? Why is that our business? Again, food for thought. It also raises the question around like the difference between lying and that slippery, self-protective behavior. When you don't feel safe to reveal your real truth, are you allowed to protect yourself? Do you have to just open up and bare your soul to anybody at any time because they asked? I mean, I have my vote, but nobody cares what a fluffy-haired girl from Kansas thinks about anything. So, just for future contemplation about any of us demanding anything from anybody else. and then being disappointed when they don't give us what we think we need. Questions around the sovereignty of each of us as individuals, both over our physical selves and our spiritual selves. You know, he's raising this profile of this vaccination debate, and like, should he be vaccinated? Well, I mean, the short answer is his employer does not require it. And from there, it's his own personal choice, which he has lined up with enough to be embodying it. And what then? I mean, other people get to disagree with his choice, but he's the one getting to live his life. So what he thinks is ultimately the most important thing. And he's not the only one. All of us as individuals get to make our choices, and we get to line our lives up with that. And not a single one of us gets to tell anybody else what to do with their own life. We only get to create inside our experiences. And the second we step out of our bounds and start trying to dictate what somebody else is going to do, that's where we open ourselves up to this projection field and all of the disappointment that goes along with it. So you almost have to wonder, like, is it your own fault when you get disappointed? And then lastly, so many questions around balance. All of that Scorpio energy balances around power. Balance is around like being the underdog and being the one that's overpowering other people. Balance of letting stress fuel you and letting it teach you and guide you. And also realizing when you need to just like shut it off and find your inner peace and your inner stillness for just a little while. Questions around balance between extreme pain and what that opens up as far as extreme healing. Balance between boldly being who you are, who you've already become, and staying open and allowing life to come to you and to help guide who you are still becoming. I genuinely appreciate you hanging out with me and diving deep into this case, this fascinating case of Aaron Rodgers, the great vaccination debate, body sovereignty, personal privacy. Man, this one had it all. And I appreciate you hanging with me. Look at you looking at the truth with clear eyes and not running away from it. Whoa, that's huge. That's huge evolutionary rocket fuel. And I am thrilled that you chose to spend this time with me. If you wouldn't mind, if you found this helpful, it does help YouTube show this work to more people. If you like it, subscribe to my channel and even leave a comment. Especially, I would love to know if you have any placements in common with Aaron Rodgers. If what I said resonated, if there's experiences that it triggered, I would love to hear from you in the comments. I read every single one of them. All the references that I use throughout the video are available in the description box, along with all the ways that you can get in contact with me. Until next time, dear friends, I'll be working on another one of these videos. If you have any suggestions for who I should cover in a future episode, please leave those in the comments. Until next time, you take such good care of yourselves, and so will I.
Appreciate that Rodgers rate on my insurance so much. I might let you win today.
Rodgers rate? You know State Farm offers everyone surprisingly great rates.
Really? Is that so? All right. Driver. I come down yet?